Chapter 1. Awakening. The setting sun painted Konoha's sky in brilliant strokes of orange and purple as Naruto stood atop the Hokage monument, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Blood trickled from several small cuts on his hands, evidence of his countless attempts at perfecting the summoning jutsu. Despite his exhaustion, determination burned bright in his azure eyes. The events of the Chunin exam preliminaries still weighed heavily on his mind, particularly Hinata's fight against Niji. He could still see it clearly, the way she had stood her ground despite overwhelming odds, the quiet strength in her eyes even as her body failed her. The memory of her blood on the arena floor made his hands clench into fists. He had made a vow on that blood, and he intended to keep it. But to defeat Niji in the finals, he needed to become stronger. Much stronger. Pervy Sage said, "I need to use more chakra." Naruto muttered to himself, reviewing Jiraiya's instructions. The legendary Sannin had spent the past few days attempting to teach him the summoning technique, though most of Naruto's attempts had resulted in nothing more than tadpoles. He said something about tapping into a different kind of chakra. Naruto closed his eyes, searching deep within himself for that other power he knew existed, the one Jiraiya had hinted at. As he concentrated, he felt something stir in his gut, a warmth different from his usual chakra. It was wild, ancient, and powerful. "One more time," he muttered, biting his thumb hard enough to draw fresh blood. His hands flew through the familiar seals. Boar, dog, bird, monkey, ram. This time he pulled on that different chakra, letting it flow through his system. Summoning jutsu. The explosion of smoke that followed was different, massive, engulfing the entire clearing. The force of it sent leaves and debris scattering in all directions, and Naruto felt himself being lifted upward. As the haze cleared, he found himself standing not on solid ground, but atop something vast and moving. His heart leaped into his throat as he realized he was perched on the head of none other than Gamabunta, the chief toad. "Who dares summon me?" The giant toad's voice rumbled like distant thunder, sending vibrations through Naruto's entire body. The massive amphibian shifted, and Naruto had to channel chakra to his feet to maintain his balance. "I did," Naruto shouted, his voice carrying a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "I'm Uzumaki Naruto, and I'm going to be the next Hokage." Gamabunta's booming laugh echoed across the village, startling birds from their perches in nearby trees. "You? A tiny runt like you summoned me?" The great toad's eyes rolled upward, trying to get a glimpse of the small figure on his head. "Ha! You remind me of another loudmouth brat from years ago." "I'm not just some brat," Naruto protested, his face flushing with indignation. "I summoned you fair and square." "Is that so?" Gamabunta rumbled, amusement evident in his tone. "Then prove it. Stay on my head until sunset tomorrow. If you can't, don't ever dream of being my subordinate." Without warning, the massive toad launched himself into the air, and Naruto's world became a blur of motion. The wind whipped violently around him as Gamabunta bounded across Konoha, each leap covering hundreds of meters. Naruto clung desperately to the toad's slippery skin, his chakra control faltering with each jarring impact. Buildings and trees flashed past in a dizzying array as Gamabunta showed no mercy in his movements. He bounced from the forest to the village walls, then back again, each landing threatening to dislodge his unwanted passenger. Several times, Naruto nearly lost his grip, saved only by his desperate determination and rapidly depleting chakra. "What's wrong, boy?" Gamabunta taunted as he landed in the middle of a lake, the impact creating waves that crashed against the shore. "Is this too much for the future Hokage?" "I won't give up." Naruto gritted his teeth, thinking of everyone who had believed in him, Irika-sensei, the third Hokage, and Hinata. Her words from the preliminary matches echoed in his mind. I never go back on my word, because that too is my ninja way." As Gamabunta made another tremendous leap, Naruto felt his grip slipping. Terror gripped his heart as he began to fall, the ground hundreds of feet below. In that moment of desperation, something within him changed. The air around him seemed to respond to his fear, swirling and condensing around his body like a protective cocoon. Time seemed to slow as Naruto felt a connection he'd never experienced before. The wind wasn't just moving around him, it was part of him, an extension of his very being. With nothing more than a thought, the air currents shifted, catching him and carrying him back to Gamabunta's head with gentle precision. The chief toad had noticed the strange phenomenon. What's this? He paused his wild movement, sensing the change in the air around them. Naruto stood atop Gamabunta's head, but now the wind swirled around him in visible currents, responding to his slightest movement. He could feel every breeze, every eddy, every current of air within hundreds of meters. It was as if he'd suddenly gained a new sense he never knew he was missing. "This is amazing," Naruto breathed, watching as the air danced around his outstretched hands. He took a step forward, and the wind supported his movement, making him as light as a feather. Another step, and he was practically floating above Gamabunta's skin. Experimentally, Naruto reached out with his newfound sense, feeling the air currents that flowed around the village. He could detect the warm updrafts from the hot springs, the cool breezes flowing down from the mountains, and even the subtle movements of air caused by people moving through the streets below. "Interesting," Gamabunta rumbled, his voice thoughtful. "It seems you've awakened something unique, boy. The wind itself bends to your will, a rare gift indeed. But don't think this makes my test any easier." The giant toad resumed his wild movements with even greater intensity, but now Naruto moved with a grace he'd never possessed before. The wind guided his movements, warning him of sudden changes in direction and helping him adjust his balance instantaneously. When Gamabunta tried to shake him off with a particularly violent twist, Naruto found himself instinctively using the air currents to stabilize himself, creating invisible platforms of compressed air to step on. As night fell over Konoha, Naruto experimented with his new abilities. He discovered he could create small whirlwinds in his palm, compress air to form invisible barriers, and even use the wind to enhance his jumps and movements. Each discovery brought new possibilities to mind, and he couldn't help but think about how these powers could help him in his upcoming match against Neji. In the hospital across the village, Hinata lay awake in her bed, still recovering from her injuries. Through her window, she watched the strange phenomenon of swirling winds in the distance, unaware that her own unwavering determination had helped catalyze this transformation in the boy she admired. As she drifted off to sleep, the last thing she saw was a mysterious figure standing atop what appeared to be a giant toad, surrounded by dancing currents of air that seemed to glow in the moonlight. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and discoveries, but for now, Naruto reveled in this newfound power. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, he knew he'd taken another step toward his dreams, and perhaps toward understanding the strength that lay in protecting those precious to him. The wind whispered promises of power and potential, and for the first time, Naruto felt truly connected to the world around him in a way he never had before. Chapter 2: Currents of Change. Dawn broke over Konoha, painting the sky in soft hues of pink and gold. Naruto hadn't slept a wink, but exhaustion was the furthest thing from his mind. Throughout the night, he'd maintained his position atop Gamabunta's head, though the great toad had settled into a more relaxed stance after midnight, seemingly impressed by his passenger's newfound abilities. "The sun rises," Gamabunta announced, his deep voice carrying across the morning stillness. "You've passed my test, boy. But more importantly, you've discovered something unique within yourself." Naruto nodded, still fascinated by the way the wind moved around him. During the long night hours, he'd begun to notice subtle changes in how he perceived the air currents. They weren't just random movements anymore. Each had its own pattern, its own story to tell. "Thanks, Chief Toad," Naruto grinned, then paused as something caught his attention. The wind had shifted, carrying with it the distinct sensation of multiple presences approaching. "Someone's coming." True enough, 3 ANBU Black Ops appeared in the clearing moments later, clearly drawn by the unusual sight of a giant toad near the village. What surprised Naruto wasn't their appearance, but the fact that he had sensed them before they arrived. The air had moved differently around their rapid approach, creating distinct patterns he could feel. "Interesting," one of the ANBU commented, noting the visible wind currents that still swirled around Naruto. "We'll need to report this to Lord Hokage." After Gamabunta disappeared in a massive puff of smoke and the ANBU departed, Naruto found himself walking through the village streets, his mind racing with possibilities. The wind still responded to his every movement, but now he was beginning to notice something else. Each person he passed created unique disturbances in the air. A group of children playing ninja left swirling eddies in their wake. A chunin jumping across rooftops generated sharp currents that cut through the morning air. Even civilians walking down the street created gentle ripples he could detect. It was overwhelming at first, like trying to listen to 100 conversations at once. I need to practice controlling this, Naruto muttered to himself, heading toward Training Ground 3. As he walked, he tried to focus on individual patterns, learning to filter out the background noise of the village's general air movements. When he reached the training ground, he found it wasn't empty. Kakashi-sensei was there, leaning against a tree while reading his ever-present book. But Naruto knew he was there before he even saw him. The Jonin's presence created a unique disturbance in the air. Calm but somehow alert, like a still pond ready to explode into motion at any moment. Ah, Naruto, Kakashi looked up from his book. I heard about your interesting night from the ANBU. Care to explain? As Naruto recounted the events with Gamabunta and his discovery of wind manipulation, he noticed something fascinating. When Kakashi shifted his stance slightly, a movement so subtle it would normally be imperceptible, the air around him changed in a way that suggested he was preparing to move. Without thinking, Naruto took a step back, just as his teacher's hand shot out in a casual testing grab. Impressive! Kakashi's visible eye crinkled in a smile. You sensed that before I moved. I did, didn't I? Naruto blinked in surprise. The air around you changed just before you moved. It was like feeling someone gather chakra before a jutsu, but different. Kakashi put his book away, giving Naruto his full attention. Let's experiment with this. Try to dodge my attacks, but only using what you can sense through the air movements. What followed was 2 hours of invaluable training. Kakashi would attack from various angles, sometimes obviously, sometimes with subtle movements that would normally be impossible to detect. At first, Naruto could only react to the most obvious changes in air currents, but as time passed, his sensitivity increased. The wind, Naruto said between breaths, having just dodged a particularly tricky combination of moves. It's like it's teaching me. Each pattern means something different. Quick, sharp changes usually mean an attack is coming. Slow builds mean someone's preparing for something bigger. Your father would have been very interested in this, Kakashi murmured, so quietly Naruto almost missed it. Before he could ask what that meant, his teacher continued more loudly. Take a break. Then we should test how well you can use this ability actively, not just defensively. During their brief rest, Naruto's thoughts drifted to Hinata. He could still visit her in the hospital before afternoon training with Pervy Sage. As if reading his mind, Kakashi spoke up. Go on. We can continue this tomorrow. Just be careful with this new ability. Don't let it overwhelm you. Focus on one thing at a time until it becomes natural. Naruto nodded, already heading toward the hospital. As he walked, he practiced filtering the air currents, trying to focus on specific patterns while ignoring others. By the time he reached the hospital, he'd developed a crude but effective way of creating a bubble of awareness around himself, extending about 20 meters in every direction. The hospital's sterile halls were a new challenge for his developing senses. The controlled environment meant less natural air movement, but he could still detect the hurried walks of medical ninja, the careful steps of nurses, and there, on the 3rd floor, a familiar gentle disturbance in the air. Hinata's presence felt different from others, calm, like a peaceful morning breeze, but with an underlying current of strength, like the wind before a summer storm. He found her room easily, guided by his new sense. She was sitting up in bed, pressing her fingers together in that familiar nervous gesture as she stared out the window. The morning sunlight cast a soft glow around her, and for a moment, Naruto found himself studying the way the air moved around her, gentle yet resilient. And Naruto-kun. Hinata's eyes widened as she noticed him in the doorway. The air around her flickered with her surprise, creating tiny eddies that fascinated him. Hey, Hinata! He entered with his usual enthusiasm. though he was distracted by what his new senses were telling him. Her heartbeat caused minute disturbances in the air, and he could feel it quicken at his approach. "How are you feeling?" "Better," she smiled softly, though the air currents around her told him she was still in some pain. "The doctors say I can start light training next week." "That's great." Naruto sat in the chair beside her bed, unconsciously noting how the air movements in the room shifted to accommodate his presence. "Hey, I've got something amazing to show you." He held out his hand, concentrating briefly. A small whirlwind formed above his palm, gathering stray flower petals from the vase on her bedside table and making them dance in a beautiful spiral. Hinata's gasp of wonder was accompanied by a delightful flutter in the air currents around her. "It's beautiful," she whispered, reaching out hesitantly to touch the miniature phenomenon. The moment her fingers entered the airflow, Naruto felt a strange resonance, as if their chakras were harmonizing through the medium of the wind itself. "I discovered it last night," he explained, letting the whirlwind dissipate gently. "I can feel the wind now, like it's part of me. I can even sense people and movements through the air currents they create." As if to demonstrate, he tilted his head slightly. "There's a nurse coming down the hall, probably doing morning rounds. And 2 floors down, someone's running, probably late for their shift." Hinata activated her Byakugan briefly, then deactivated it with a look of surprise. "You're right. That's amazing, Naruto-kun." They spent the next hour talking, with Naruto describing his night on Gamabanta's head and his morning training with Kakashi. He found himself paying special attention to the way the air moved around Hinata as she listened, how it would still when she was focused on his words, flutter when she laughed softly at his jokes, or swirl gently when she offered quiet words of encouragement. As he left the hospital later, promising to visit again tomorrow, Naruto realized something important. His wind sensing wasn't just about detecting movements or predicting attacks. It was giving him a new way to understand people. Each person's impact on the air around them was as unique as their chakra signature or personality, and learning to read these patterns felt as natural as learning to read emotions in someone's face. Walking toward his next training session with Jiraiya, Naruto smiled as he felt the wind's embrace, stronger and more familiar with each passing hour. He had a lot to learn, but somehow he knew this was just the beginning of something extraordinary. Chapter 3: Winds of Integration. Focus, kid. You're letting the wind distract you from molding your chakra properly. Jiraiya's voice cut through Naruto's concentration as he attempted to balance on a sharp rocky spire using only his chakra control. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the training ground, where the Sannin had been putting him through increasingly difficult exercises for the past 3 hours. "I'm trying, pervy sage." Naruto gritted his teeth, struggling to maintain his position. The wind whirled around him, automatically trying to assist his balance, but that was exactly what Jiraiya didn't want. It comes naturally now. Like breathing. That's exactly the problem. Jiraiya crossed his arms, watching his student with a calculating gaze. The wind's becoming a crutch. You need to learn to control it, not let it control you. What happens when you face an enemy in an enclosed space with no air circulation? Naruto hadn't considered that. The thought made him uncomfortable over the past day. He'd grown so accustomed to his wind sense that losing it would be like going blind. As if to prove Jiraiya's point, his momentary distraction caused his chakra control to slip. The wind instantly responded, creating an invisible platform to catch him. "No!" Jiraiya barked. "Do it again, and this time, suppress the wind's automatic response. You need to master both abilities independently before you can truly combine them." Naruto nodded, climbing back onto the spire. This time, he consciously reined in the protective currents that wanted to swirl around him. It was harder than he expected, like trying not to blink when something came toward your eye. But gradually, he found the right balance, using only his chakra to maintain his position. "Better," Jiraiya nodded approvingly. "Now let's try something different. Create 3 shadow clones." Naruto formed his signature hand seal, and 3 copies of himself appeared in puffs of smoke. Each clone naturally had the same wind sensitivity as the original, creating an interesting phenomenon where multiple sources of wind control existed simultaneously. "Interesting," Jiraiya murmured. studying the way the air currents interacted between the original Naruto and his clones. Each clone has independent control over the wind, but they're all connected to your consciousness. This could be very useful. What followed was an hour of experimentation with clone coordination. Naruto discovered that his clones could create complex wind patterns by working together, each manipulating their portion of the air to create effects that would be impossible for a single controller. "Look at this pervy sage," Naruto exclaimed excitedly. He and his clones had created a rotating sphere of compressed air, similar in shape to the Rasengan but composed entirely of wind manipulation rather than pure chakra. Jiraiya's eyes widened slightly. "Hold that thought, kid." He walked around the sphere, studying it from different angles. "You might be onto something here. The fourth Hokage always said the Rasengan was incomplete, that it was supposed to have nature transformation added to it." Nature transformation? Naruto's concentration broke, and the wind sphere dissipated. "You mean like adding wind chakra to it?" "Exactly," Jiraiya grinned. "But that's a project for another day. Right now, let's work on combining your wind control with basic combat techniques." They spent the next 2 hours practicing different combinations. Naruto learned that he could use the wind to enhance the speed and power of his punches and kicks, though it required precise control to avoid throwing himself off balance. His clones proved particularly effective when they coordinated their wind manipulation to create unpredictable attack patterns. As the sun began to set, Naruto discovered another interesting application of his ability. By having his clones manipulate the air currents in specific ways, he could create a sort of wind-based communication network, sending subtle signals through the air that only he could detect. "That's enough for today," Jiraiya finally announced. "You're making good progress, but don't get overconfident. Tomorrow we'll work on." He paused, noting how Naruto's attention had suddenly shifted. His head tilted slightly as he focused on distant air currents. "Hinata's left the hospital," Naruto said absently, recognizing her unique signature in the wind. She was moving slowly, probably still recovering, but definitely heading home. Then he blushed, realizing he'd said that out loud. Jiraiya's eyebrows rose. "Oh, the Hyuga girl? You can recognize specific people through their effect on the air currents." "Yeah," Naruto nodded, then elaborated as he saw his teacher's interested expression. "Everyone affects the air differently. Hinata's presence feels like a gentle stream, flowing quietly but with hidden strength. Yours feels like a gathering storm, calm on the surface but with massive power underneath. Kakashi-sensei's is like a still pond that can explode into motion any second." "Fascinating," Jiraiya stroked his chin thoughtfully. "You're developing a level of sensitivity that usually takes years to achieve. The wind really has become an extension of your consciousness." "Should I go check on her?" Naruto asked, still tracking Hinata's movement through his wind sense. "She's moving kind of slowly." "Go ahead." Jiraiya waved him off with a knowing smile. "But tomorrow we're going to work on maintaining your wind awareness while using more complex jutsu. The Chunin exam finals aren't far off, and Niji Hyuga won't be an easy opponent." Naruto nodded seriously, then took off toward where he sensed Hinata's presence. As he moved through the village, he practiced what he'd learned during training, using his wind control to enhance his movement speed while maintaining awareness of his surroundings through air currents. He caught up to Hinata near the Hyuga compound. She was walking slowly, one hand occasionally reaching out to steady herself against walls or fences. The air currents around her showed signs of fatigue and discomfort, though she maintained her usual gentle dignity. "Hey, Hinata!" he called out, landing softly beside her. The wind automatically cushioned his landing, making it completely silent. "And Naruto-kun?" She startled slightly, though he noticed her air patterns showed more pleasant surprise than alarm. "How did you know I was here?" "I sensed you through the wind," he explained, falling into step beside her. "Should you be out of the hospital already? The air around you still shows signs of pain." Hinata's eyes widened slightly. "You can tell that?" "Yeah, it's like ripples in your usual pattern, kind of like when a stone disturbs the surface of a pond." He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Want me to walk you home? I can help if you get tired." A soft blush colored Hinata's cheeks, but she nodded. As they walked, Naruto found himself unconsciously using his wind control to create a gentle buffer around them, deflecting dust and making the air pleasantly cool in the warm evening. "Your control is improving," Hinata observed quietly. "The way you move now, it's like you're dancing with the wind." Naruto grinned, pleased by her observation. "Thanks, I've been training hard. Watch this." He created a small whirlwind in his palm, but this time, instead of just making flower petals dance, he shaped the air into delicate patterns, miniature dragons and birds that swirled around them as they walked. Hinata's delight was evident both in her smile and in the way the air danced around her in response. Naruto found himself paying special attention to these reactions, fascinated by how her emotions affected the wind patterns around her. When they reached the Hyuga compound gates, Naruto sensed several presences inside, including one that made the air feel sharp and cold. Niji. The reminder of their upcoming match sobered him slightly. "Thank you, Naruto-kun," Hinata said softly, turning to face him, "for walking me home and for showing me your new abilities. They're beautiful." "Thanks, Hinata," he replied, equally soft. "I'll visit you again tomorrow, if that's okay? I want to show you more as I learn new things." Her happy nod was accompanied by a pleasant swirl in the air currents, and Naruto found himself smiling all the way home. As he prepared for bed that night, he reflected on how much had changed in just 2 days. The wind had become more than just a new power. It was a new way of seeing the world and understanding the people in it. Tomorrow would bring more training and challenges, but for now, he let himself drift off to sleep, the gentle night breeze singing through his window like a lullaby, carrying with it the promise of growth and change to come. Chapter 4. Multiplied Knowledge. Kid, have you ever noticed anything strange after your shadow clones disperse? Jiraiya's question came early the next morning, as Naruto created a dozen clones for their daily training session. The sun had barely risen, painting the training ground in soft golden light. Each clone stood ready, wind currents swirling around them in identical patterns. "Strange how?" Naruto asked, then paused as something occurred to him. "Well, sometimes I get tired all of a sudden when they disappear, and sometimes I feel like I remember doing things I didn't actually do." "Exactly." Jiraiya's face lit up. "That's because the shadow clone jutsu doesn't just create copies of your body. When a clone disperses, its experiences and memories return to the original user." Naruto's eyes widened. "Wait. You mean everything my clones learn, I learn too?" "Now you're getting it," Jiraiya grinned. "That's why the shadow clone jutsu was originally created as a reconnaissance technique. One person could gather information from multiple locations simultaneously." The implications hit Naruto like a thunderbolt. All those times he'd used shadow clones in training or battle, he'd been unknowingly receiving their accumulated experiences. The air around him stirred excitedly as he processed this revelation. "So if I have my clones practice different things, you'll gain the experience from all of them at once," Jiraiya confirmed. "But be careful, mental fatigue from too many clones dispersing at once can be dangerous. Start small and work your way up." Naruto could hardly contain his excitement. "That's why you had me create clones yesterday, when we were practicing wind control." "Partly," Jiraiya nodded. "I wanted to see if you'd notice on your own. Now that you understand this, we can make your training much more efficient." They spent the next hour experimenting with different training configurations. Naruto divided his clones into groups, each focusing on different aspects of his wind manipulation. Some practiced pure wind control, others worked on combining wind with basic taijutsu, and another group attempted to integrate wind manipulation with chakra control exercises. "Disperse them one group at a time," Jiraiya instructed. "Let your mind process each set of experiences separately." As each group of clones disappeared, Naruto felt the rush of their accumulated knowledge. It was overwhelming at first, dozens of perspectives and experiences flooding his consciousness simultaneously. But gradually, he began to understand how to sort and integrate the information. "This is incredible," Naruto exclaimed after processing the memories from a group that had been practicing wind-enhanced jumping techniques. "I can feel exactly what they did wrong and right. It's like like having hours of practice in just minutes. Don't get too excited, Jiraiya warned. Physical skills still need real body experience to fully develop. But this will help you perfect the theoretical aspects much faster. They established a new training regime. Every morning, Naruto would create multiple groups of clones, each with specific training objectives. Some would work with Jiraiya on chakra control and jutsu, others would practice wind manipulation in various forms, and a few would even sit quietly, focusing purely on developing their wind-sensing abilities. By mid-morning, Naruto had made more progress than he had in the previous 2 days combined. His wind control was becoming more refined, and he was starting to develop combat applications that even impressed Jiraiya. Watch this, pervy sage. Naruto created 4 clones, spacing them in a square formation. Each clone began manipulating the air currents in a specific pattern, creating a complex network of wind flows. In the center, Naruto himself formed a Rasengan, but this time, the swirling winds from his clones began to feed into it. The Rasengan took on a different character, the usually blue sphere gaining a whitish tinge as wind nature chakra began to mix with the pure chakra rotation. It wasn't stable yet, but it was progress. Interesting approach, Jiraiya observed. Using the clones to handle the wind manipulation while you maintain the basic Rasengan structure. Creative thinking, kid. The technique collapsed before Naruto could stabilize it, but the memory of how it felt, multiplied by his clones' perspectives, gave him valuable insights for future attempts. As they broke for lunch, Naruto sensed a familiar presence approaching through his wind awareness. The air currents carried Hinata's unique signature, but today it felt stronger, more purposeful than her usual gentle flow. She appeared at the edge of the training ground, carrying 2 bento boxes. I thought you might be hungry, Naruto-kun, she said softly, though her posture showed more confidence than usual. And I wanted to watch your training, if that's okay. Jiraiya's grin turned mischievous. Well, I need to check on something in town anyway. Take an hour for lunch, kid. Then we'll work on combining your new shadow clone knowledge with combat scenarios. As the Sannin disappeared in a swirl of leaves, Naruto and Hinata settled under a large tree at the edge of the training ground. The wind naturally curved around them, creating a peaceful bubble that kept the dust and heat at bay. How are you feeling today? Naruto asked, accepting one of the bento boxes with genuine appreciation. Through the air currents, he could sense that her movements were smoother than yesterday, though still not at full strength. Much better, Hinata smiled, and the air around her confirmed her words. The doctors say I'm healing faster than expected. She paused, pressing her fingers together in her characteristic gesture. Would you show me what you've been learning? Naruto's face lit up. Sure. Actually, I just found out something amazing about shadow clones. He explained about the memory transferability while they ate, demonstrating with a couple of clones that performed simple wind manipulation exercises. Hinata's eyes widened as she watched him disperse the clones and process their experiences. That's incredible, Naruto-kun, with your chakra reserves and this ability. I know, right? He grinned. Here, watch this. He created several clones, having them coordinate their wind control to create a complex aerial display. The winds wove together in intricate patterns, forming shapes and images in the disturbed dust and leaves, dragons chasing each other through clouds, birds soaring on thermal currents, and even a miniature reproduction of the Hokage monument. Hinata's delight was evident both in her expression and in the way her own presence in the air brightened. Naruto found himself paying special attention to these subtle changes in her wind signature, fascinated by how her emotions painted patterns in the air around her. Your control is amazing, she said softly. The way you and your clones work together, it's like watching a dance. Naruto rubbed the back of his head, a light blush coloring his cheeks. Thanks. Hey, want to try something? Stand up for a second. When she complied, Naruto created 4 clones who took positions around them. Each clone began manipulating the air currents in a specific way, creating a gentle upward spiral. Naruto held out his hand to Hinata. Do you trust me? She took his hand without hesitation, and Naruto guided her into the center of the wind current. Together, they began to rise slowly off the ground, supported by the carefully controlled airflow. Hinata's initial surprise quickly turned to wonder as they floated several feet above the earth, surrounded by swirling winds that carried cherry blossom petals from a nearby tree. "This is beautiful," Hinata breathed, her free hand reaching out to touch the spinning petals. The air currents around her resonated with pure joy, creating harmonious patterns with Naruto's own wind manipulation. They spent the rest of their lunch break experimenting with different wind techniques, Naruto discovering that Hinata's natural grace and precise chakra control made her an excellent partner for his wind manipulation experiments. Her Byakugan also provided valuable insights into how his chakra flowed when using wind techniques. As Jiraiya's return approached, signaled by his distinctive presence in the wind currents, Naruto realized something important. Training wasn't just about getting stronger anymore. It was about protecting the people precious to him. The way Hinata's presence felt in the wind, so pure and determined despite her recent injuries, reinforced his resolve to master these new abilities. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked as they cleaned up from lunch. Hinata's nod was accompanied by a pleasant flutter in the air currents around her. As she left, Naruto turned to face his returning teacher, new determination evident in his stance. "Ready to take it to the next level, kid?" Jiraiya asked, noting his student's expression. "More than ready," Naruto replied, the wind swirling with his resolve. "Let's see what else these shadow clones can help us discover." The afternoon sun watched as teacher and student dove into increasingly complex training exercises, the air filled with the sound of multiple Narutos working to master their newfound abilities. Each dispersed clone adding another piece to the growing puzzle of his potential Chapter 5, Foundations. "Stop using the wind as a crutch." Jiraiya's voice cut through the morning air as he sent Naruto tumbling across the training ground with a well-placed sweep. "Your base physical abilities need to be solid before you layer wind manipulation on top." Naruto pushed himself up, wiping dirt from his face. He had instinctively tried to use the wind to cushion his fall, but Jiraiya had dispersed the air current before it could form. 5 days had passed since discovering his wind abilities, and the Sannin was determined to ensure his student didn't become overly dependent on them. "But the wind makes everything easier," Naruto protested, settling back into a defensive stance. "That's exactly the problem." Jiraiya moved forward with surprising speed for someone his size, engaging Naruto in pure taijutsu. "What happens when you face an opponent who can counter your wind control, or fight in an environment where wind manipulation is limited? Your base skills need to be strong enough to stand on their own." The next hour was grueling. Jiraiya drilled Naruto through basic taijutsu forms, correcting his stances and movements while consistently preventing him from using wind manipulation. The training reminded Naruto of how he'd learned the Rasengan just 2 weeks ago, just after the preliminary rounds. Flashback, 2 weeks earlier asterisk. "The Rasengan?" Naruto had asked, watching Jiraiya form the spinning ball of chakra in his palm. "One of the 4th Hokage's signature techniques," Jiraiya explained, letting the sphere dissipate. "He spent 3 years developing it. It's pure shape manipulation, no elemental chakra needed." "And you're going to teach it to me?" Naruto's eyes had sparkled with excitement. "You'll need something special to compete in the finals," Jiraiya had grinned. "But first you need to understand the basics. No shortcuts." What followed were days of frustrating practice with water balloons, rubber balls, and regular balloons. Each step had seemed impossible at first, but Naruto's determination and liberal use of shadow clones had eventually prevailed. "You're learning it faster than I expected," Jiraiya had commented one evening, watching Naruto maintain a stable Rasengan. The 4th would be impressed. Something in his teacher's tone had caught Naruto's attention, but before he could ask about it, Jiraiya had moved on to the next phase of training. A sharp blow to his shoulder brought Naruto back to the present. "Focus," Jiraiya barked. "Your reaction time is good, but your form is sloppy." Again. They continued the pure physical training until noon. By then, Naruto's muscles were screaming, but he could feel the difference. Without the wind to assist him, he was forced to rely on his natural speed and strength, which were improving rapidly. "Better," Jiraiya nodded approvingly. "Now create your shadow clones. Half will continue physical training while the others work on wind control. Remember what we discussed about memory transfer. Don't disperse them all at once. As Naruto prepared to create the clones, he sensed a familiar presence approaching. The air carried Hinata's signature, but today it seemed more hesitant than usual. She appeared at the edge of the training ground, carrying her customary bento boxes, but her eyes were downcast and her fingers pressed together nervously. Hello, Naruto-kun, she said softly, her stutter more pronounced than it had been the past few days. The initial shock and wonder of his wind abilities had worn off somewhat, allowing her natural shyness to resurface. Hinata! Naruto's face lit up, though he noticed through the air currents how her heart rate jumped at his enthusiastic greeting. Perfect timing. I was just about to start clone training. Oh! She looked up briefly before glancing away again, a blush coloring her cheeks. May I watch again? Of course. He grinned, then turned to Jiraiya. Pervy Sage, can we take a quick break for lunch? Jiraiya waved his hand dismissively, though a knowing smile played at his lips. Take your hour. When you get back, we're going to work on combining your improved taijutsu with wind manipulation, but only after I'm satisfied with your base form. As the Sannin disappeared, Naruto and Hinata settled under what had become their usual tree. The wind naturally curved around them, but this time Naruto made sure to maintain control of it, not letting it act autonomously as it had been wanting to do. How are you feeling today? He asked, accepting the bento with genuine appreciation. Through the air currents, he could sense that her movements were almost back to normal, though there was still a slight hesitation in certain motions. Be better, she smiled softly, keeping her eyes on her own bento. Father has allowed me to resume light training. That's great. Naruto's enthusiasm caused her to jump slightly, and he consciously modulated his volume. Sorry, that's really good news. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, Naruto sensing through the air currents how Hinata's nervous energy gradually settled into something calmer, though her heart rate still jumped whenever their eyes met. And Naruto-kun? She finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. About your training, I noticed something with my Byakugan yesterday. Really? What did you see? He leaned forward eagerly, causing her to blush deeper and press her fingers together more firmly. Well. She activated her Byakugan briefly, then deactivated it, seeming to gather her courage. When you use the wind, your chakra flow changes. It's like watching two rivers merge. If you adjusted the timing slightly, she trailed off, looking down again. Hey, that's really helpful. Naruto created a shadow clone to experiment with what she'd suggested. Would you mind watching with your Byakugan and telling me if I'm doing it right? Her eyes widened slightly before she nodded, activating her Jujutsu again. For the next several minutes, she provided quiet guidance as Naruto adjusted his chakra flow, her natural shyness temporarily overcome by her desire to help. That's it, she exclaimed softly when he finally got it right, then immediately blushed at her own outburst, pressing her fingers together again. Naruto grinned, both at the success and at Hinata's adorable shift between confidence and shyness. The air currents around her were fascinating, swirling with happiness at being helpful, yet fluttering with nervous energy whenever their eyes met or hands accidentally brushed. As their lunch break drew to a close, Naruto found himself appreciating how Hinata's presence had become a constant bright spot in his training routine. Even with her renewed shyness, there was an underlying current of strength in her wind signature that reminded him of why he was working so hard. Same time tomorrow? He asked as they cleaned up. Your Byakugan really helps with understanding how the wind and chakra work together. I'd like that, she nodded, managing to meet his eyes briefly before looking away again, the air around her dancing with a mixture of joy and nervous energy. As Hinata left and Jiraiya returned, Naruto created his training groups of shadow clones with renewed determination. Some began working on the pure physical training they'd focused on that morning, while others practiced wind manipulation with the adjusted chakra flow Hinata had helped him discover. Ready for the next phase? Jiraiya asked, noting his students' focused expression. Ready? Naruto nodded, the wind swirling around him with controlled purpose rather than its usual excitable energy. Let's see how much stronger I can get without relying on the wind, so that when I do use it, it'll be even more effective. The afternoon sun watched as multiple Narutos threw themselves into their training, each group focusing on different aspects of improvement. While the original worked with Jiraiya on combining his growing physical abilities with his wind manipulation. The finals were approaching, and with each passing day, Naruto was becoming more at Han just the boy who could control the wind. He was becoming a more complete shinobi. Chapter 6. Convergence. The pre-dawn air was crisp and still as Naruto moved through his warm-up katas. A week had passed since Jiraiya had insisted on improving his base abilities, and the results were becoming evident. His movements were sharper, more precise, no longer relying on the wind to correct his balance or enhance his speed. The wind still responded to his presence, but now it was a controlled response rather than the automatic assistance of before. Naruto had learned to let it flow around him without immediately trying to direct it, maintaining awareness without dependence. Good! Jiraiya's voice came from nearby. The Sannin had been watching silently, evaluating his student's progress. Your form has improved significantly. Now, show me how you'd enhance these movements with wind manipulation, but maintain the proper base form. Naruto nodded, beginning the kata again. This time, he deliberately introduced wind manipulation but differently than before. Instead of letting the wind carry his movements, he used it to create resistance, forcing his muscles to work harder while maintaining proper form. Each punch and kick cut through carefully positioned air currents, making the simple exercise into an advanced training method. Interesting approach, Jiraiya commented, stroking his chin thoughtfully. You're using the wind as opposition rather than assistance. When did you come up with that? Yesterday, actually, Naruto replied, continuing the exercise. My clones were practicing different things, and one group noticed how moving against the wind made their muscles work harder. When the memories came back, I thought about using it in training. The morning progressed with Jiraiya having Naruto experiment with different combinations of physical technique and wind manipulation. They discovered that by precisely controlling wind resistance, Naruto could simulate training at different altitudes or under various environmental conditions. The key is balance, Jiraiya explained, demonstrating a complex series of movements. The wind should complement your natural abilities, not replace them. Think of it like the Rasengan. The power comes from proper technique, not just raw chakra. Naruto created several groups of shadow clones to practice different aspects of this integrated approach. Some focused on pure taijutsu, others on wind control, and a third group worked on combining the two. Each clone's experience would contribute to his overall understanding when dispersed. As the sun climbed higher, Naruto sensed Hinata's approach through the air currents. Her presence had become a regular part of his training routine, though she still maintained her endearing shyness. Today, however, something felt different in her wind signature. There was an unusual determination mixed with her typical gentle energy. Good morning, Naruto-kun," she greeted softly, setting down her customary bento boxes. She pressed her fingers together but managed to maintain eye contact for a moment longer than usual. I brought something else today." From a small bag, she withdrew several scrolls. "These are some basic gentle fist forms. I thought, maybe they could help with your training? The principles of chakra control might work well with your wind manipulation." Jiraiya's eyebrows rose with interest. "The Hyuga clan's prized techniques? Are you sure about this, young lady?" Hinata nodded, though her fingers pressed together more firmly. "These are just basic forms. Nothing secret, but the way Naruto-kun uses the wind, it reminded me of how we channel chakra in the gentle fist." "Interesting comparison," Jiraiya mused. "The gentle fist uses precise chakra control to affect the internal systems of an opponent. Your wind manipulation could potentially be refined to a similar level of precision, kid." They spent the next hour reviewing the scrolls, with Hinata occasionally demonstrating the basic movements. Though her natural shyness made her stammer when explaining things directly to Naruto, her knowledge of the techniques was evident. "See how the chakra flows?" She activated her Byakugan to observe as Naruto attempted one of the forms. "It's like a river finding its path. The wind should flow the same way." Naruto concentrated on the exercise, trying to match his wind manipulation to the precise control demonstrated in the gentle fist style. It was challenging. Where he usually used the wind in broad, powerful movements, this required much finer control. "I think I'm getting it," he said after several attempts. The wind around his hands had condensed into something almost visible, flowing in patterns similar to the chakra paths Hinata had described. "It's like, instead of pushing with the wind, I'm letting it pierce through." "Exactly." Hinata's excitement momentarily overcame her shyness, before she caught herself and looked down, blushing. "I mean, yes, that's the idea, Naruto-kun." Jiraiya watched with growing interest as Naruto began incorporating elements of the gentle fist's precision into his wind techniques. The boy's shadow clones spread out across the training ground, each practicing different aspects of this new approach. "Kid," Jiraiya called out after observing for a while, "try combining this with your Rasengan." Naruto's eyes lit up at the suggestion. He formed the familiar spiraling sphere in his right hand, then began applying the principles they'd just learned. The wind curved around the Rasengan in tight, controlled streams, gradually integrating with the chakra rotation. "Look!" he exclaimed excitedly. The Rasengan had taken on a slightly different character. The usual blue sphere now had visible threads of wind weaving through it, like tiny tornadoes within the larger rotation. "Naruto-kun." Hinata's soft voice held a note of awe as she observed with her Byakugan. "The chakra patterns. They're changing. It's becoming more focused." The technique wasn't complete. Maintaining the wind streams within the Rasengan's rotation proved extremely challenging. But it was progress. More importantly, it showed how the precision of the gentle fist style could be adapted to enhance Naruto's existing techniques. As their lunch break approached, Jiraiya stepped back to let his student continue practicing with Hinata's guidance. The Sannin watched thoughtfully as the two young ninja worked together, Hinata offering quiet suggestions about chakra flow while Naruto experimented with different wind patterns, her shyness temporarily forgotten in their shared focus on improvement. "Their energies complement each other well," he mused to himself, her precision balancing his power, his confidence encouraging her strength. The morning's discovery led to a new training regimen. While maintaining his physical conditioning, Naruto began incorporating the precise control principles of the gentle fist into his wind manipulation. His shadow clones would cycle through different aspects of the training, some working on the refined wind control, others on the physical forms, and a select few attempting to combine them with existing techniques like the Rasengan. As the day progressed, Naruto found himself appreciating Hinata's help more and more, though she still blushed and stuttered when their eyes met or their hands accidentally brushed while reviewing scroll positions. Her knowledge of chakra control and willingness to help had opened up new possibilities for his training. "Thank you, Hinata," he said sincerely as she prepared to leave. "These scrolls, they're really helping me understand how to use the wind better." "I'm glad," she replied softly, managing to meet his eyes for a moment before looking down again, her fingers pressed together. "You're working so hard, Naruto-kun. I just wanted to help." The air currents around her swirled with a mixture of happiness and shy embarrassment, a combination that Naruto had come to find endearing. As she left, he turned back to his training with renewed determination, the wind flowing around him in patterns that were becoming increasingly precise and controlled. "The finals are in 2 weeks, Jiraiya reminded him as they prepared for the afternoon session. "Let's see how well you can combine everything you've learned so far." Naruto nodded, creating his training groups of shadow clones. The wind responded to his call, no longer the wild and automatic force it had been at first, but a refined tool that worked in harmony with his improving physical abilities. As he began the afternoon's exercises, he couldn't help but smile. He was becoming stronger in ways he hadn't expected, and he had people he could thank for helping him along the way. The sun watched as multiple Narutos trained across the field, each working to perfect different aspects of his growing abilities, while the original focused on combining them all into something new, something that would show everyone, especially Niji, that determination and hard work could indeed overcome any obstacle. Chapter 7. Natural Flow. Jiraiya stood atop the Hokage monument well before dawn, waiting. His mind wandered back to the previous day's training session, particularly the way the Hyuga girl had demonstrated the gentle fist forms. Something about her movements had caught his attention, a subtle inconsistency he'd seen before in shinobi whose natural affinities conflicted with their taught fighting styles. YOSH, what a youthful hour for a meeting. Might Guy landed nearby in his characteristic green spandex, enthusiasm undimmed by the early hour. When you mentioned wanting to discuss taijutsu, I couldn't wait, though I admit, I was surprised by your message. Thanks for coming, Guy. Jiraiya turned to face the taijutsu master. I need your expertise on something. You've seen Hinata Hyuga's fighting style, right? Guy's expression turned thoughtful, his usual exuberance temporarily subdued. Yes, during the preliminaries and in general training. Her form is technically correct, but it doesn't flow naturally, Jiraiya finished, like she's trying to force herself into a mold that doesn't quite fit. Exactly, Guy nodded vigorously. The gentle fist style traditionally harmonizes with an earth-nature affinity, which most Hyuga possess. But Hinata-chan, her movements remind me more of flowing water trying to mimic solid stone. That's what I thought. Jiraiya stroked his chin. The way she moved yesterday while demonstrating basic forms to Naruto. There were moments when she unconsciously deviated from the strict gentle fist structure, and her strikes looked more fluid, more natural. Ah, you think her natural affinity is water? Guy's eyes lit up with understanding. That would explain much. But why the sudden interest? Jiraiya explained about Hinata's help with Naruto's training, how her insights into chakra control had helped refine his wind manipulation. She's been a positive influence on the kid's development. I thought maybe we could return the favor. What a youthful proposition. Guy's volume returned full force, to help a young kunoichi find her true path. But the Hyuga clan is quite strict about their traditional techniques. That's why I came to you first, Jiraiya grinned. You're the expert in adapting taijutsu to individual needs. If anyone can help modify the gentle fist to better suit a water affinity while maintaining its core principles, it's you. They spent the next hour discussing possibilities, with Guy demonstrating various movements that could bridge the gap between traditional gentle fist and a more fluid fighting style. By the time the sun began to rise, they had the beginnings of a plan. Later that morning, Naruto arrived at the training ground to find not only Jiraiya waiting, but also Might Guy. The wind carried their serious expressions to him even before he could see their faces clearly. Naruto, Guy's voice boomed across the clearing. Your most youthful teacher has requested my assistance in taking your taijutsu to the next level. Really? Naruto's eyes widened. Everyone knew Guy was Konoha's foremost taijutsu expert. But what about my wind training? We'll integrate everything, Jiraiya assured him. But Guy here has some insights that could help both your base taijutsu and your wind-enhanced combat style. What followed was an intense morning of training. Guy broke down Naruto's basic stance and movement patterns, making subtle adjustments that dramatically improved his efficiency. The taijutsu master had an uncanny ability to spot tiny imperfections in form that, when corrected, made techniques feel completely different. The wind responds better when my movements are cleaner, Naruto realized after practicing a particularly complex combination. It's like, there's less resistance. Exactly. Guy flashed his signature smile. When your body moves naturally and efficiently, your chakra, and by extension, your wind control, flows more smoothly. They were interrupted mid-morning by Hinata's arrival. She hesitated at the edge of the training ground, clearly surprised to see Might Guy present. Naruto noticed her uncertainty but didn't comment on the slight flutter in the air around her. He'd been practicing tuning out such minor emotional signals unless they were relevant to combat or safety. Ah, Hinata. Jiraiya called out. Perfect timing. Guy and I wanted to discuss something with you. As Hinata approached, Guy and Jiraiya explained their observations about her natural movement tendencies and their idea for adapting the gentle fist to better suit her apparent water affinity. They were careful to emphasize that this wouldn't replace her traditional training, but rather supplement it with variations that might feel more natural. But the clan. Hinata pressed her fingers together, though her eyes showed a glimmer of interest. Would benefit from seeing how their techniques can be adapted to different affinities, Jiraiya pointed out. Think of it as expanding the style, not changing it. And your most youthful father need not know until you've developed something worth demonstrating, Guy added with a wink. After some gentle encouragement, Hinata agreed to try. What followed was a fascinating training session where Guy worked with both young ninjas simultaneously, helping Naruto refine his wind-enhanced combat style while showing Hinata how to incorporate more fluid movements into her gentle fist techniques. See how Naruto-kun uses the wind to enhance his movements? Guy pointed out during one exercise. You can apply a similar principle with water-natured chakra, making your strikes flow like a river rather than strike like a mountain. As they practiced, Jiraiya observed with growing satisfaction. Naruto's movements were becoming more refined, the wind responding to his improved form with greater precision. Meanwhile, Hinata's modified gentle fist strikes, though still experimental, already looked more natural than her traditional form. Now, Guy announced after several hours of practice, let's see how your youthful styles match up. Naruto-kun, attack with your wind-enhanced techniques. Hinata-chan, defend with your new flowing form. Remember, this is about exploration, not competition. The sparring session that followed was enlightening. Naruto's wind-enhanced strikes met Hinata's more fluid defense in a dance of complementary energies. Where before she might have tried to stand firm against his attacks, now she redirected them, using movements that resembled water flowing around obstacles. Good, Guy called out. Naruto, vary your wind pressure. Hinata, feel how your opponent's energy can be guided rather than blocked. By lunchtime, both young ninja were exhausted but excited by their progress. Hinata's usual shyness had been temporarily overcome by her focus on learning the new variations, though it returned as they settled for their meal break. Thank you, Guy-sensei, she said softly. I never thought about adapting the gentle fist this way. The strongest trees are those that can bend in the wind without breaking, Guy declared. Your natural affinity is a gift, not a limitation. As they ate, Jiraiya and Guy discussed plans for ongoing training. They would continue this joint session approach 3 times a week, focusing on helping both young ninja develop their individual styles while learning to work together effectively. The finals are approaching, Jiraiya reminded them. But what you're learning here goes beyond that. These are foundations you'll build on for years to come. Naruto nodded seriously, glancing at Hinata, who was focused on her food, though he could tell she was listening intently. The wind carried only the most relevant sensations to him now. He'd learned to filter out the constant emotional background noise and focus on what mattered for combat and awareness. All right, Guy jumped to his feet as lunch concluded. Let's fan your flames of youth even higher this afternoon. Naruto-kun, we'll work on combining your improved taijutsu with wind manipulation in more complex patterns. Hinata-chan, I'll show you how to adapt some basic water manipulation exercises to enhance your modified gentle fist. As they resumed training, Jiraiya watched his student with pride. Naruto was growing in ways that went beyond simple power increases. He was learning to integrate different skills, to work with others, and to understand that true strength came from building on solid foundations. The afternoon sun watched as the clearing filled with the sounds of training, Naruto's wind techniques cutting through the air, Hinata's modified gentle fist strikes creating patterns that seemed to flow like water, and Guy's enthusiastic encouragement pushing both young ninja to explore their potential. Change was coming, not just for the upcoming finals, but for the future of both young shinobi's fighting styles. Chapter 8, Village Life. The early morning peace of Konoha's shopping district was shattered by a familiar voice. Get back here with those ingredients. A flash of orange streaked past the opening stalls, followed closely by what appeared to be another flash of orange, and another, and another. Several Narutos chased each other through the market, leaping over carts and ducking under awnings while clutching various bags of groceries. Boss said we have to get everything to Ichiraku's before they open, one clone shouted. Yeah, but you grabbed the wrong spices, another fired back. Did not. Did too. The original Naruto watched from atop a nearby roof, face-palming as his clones caused chaos in their attempt to help Tucci prepare for Ichiraku's busiest day of the month, Discount Ramen Day. He'd offered to help after noticing their usual delivery was running late, but perhaps sending clones to gather ingredients hadn't been his brightest idea. Your clones seem energetic this morning, a lazy voice commented. Kakashi appeared beside his student, nose buried in his ever-present book. They're supposed to be helping, Naruto groaned as one clone accidentally appended a cart of tomatoes while dodging another's attempt to snatch his grocery bag. But they each decided they know best which ingredients to get. Ah, the joys of multiple personalities all convinced they're right. Kakashi's visible eye crinkled in amusement. Though I have to admit, your awareness has improved considerably during training. Youth waits for no one, especially not on discount ramen day. A green blur shot through the market, somehow managing to catch all the falling tomatoes before they hit the ground. Might Guy landed in a dramatic pose, balancing the rescued produce in an impressive stack. Guy-sensei, Naruto's clones called out in unison. Ah, my eternal rival. Guy spotted Kakashi and bounded up to the rooftop, still perfectly balancing the tomatoes. I see you're also supervising your students' morning training. Did you say something? Kakashi turned a page in his book. Such hip and cool attitude. Guy's eyes leaked manly tears while the tomatoes remained mysteriously stable. But surely you've noticed how your students' flames of youth have been burning even brighter lately. Down in the market, Naruto's clones had finally sorted out their ingredient dispute and were helping the vendor clean up their mess. The original Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Speaking of training, Kakashi finally looked up from his book. I heard Hinata's Juho practice has been progressing well. Yes. Guy's enthusiasm somehow increased. A most youthful development. The training sessions with Jiraiya-sama have shown remarkable results. All that hard work will definitely help her grow stronger. Kakashi's eye flickered to Naruto. Though I imagine you're focused on your own preparation for the finals now. Before Naruto could respond, he noticed a familiar presence approaching the market. Though something felt off about Hinata's usually gentle demeanor, she seemed more agitated than normal.
And Naruto-kun.
Hinata appeared at the end of the street, slightly out of breath. Her traditional grace was still present, but there was an urgent energy in her movements. Hanabi-chan is... she's... A smaller blur shot past Hinata, radiating determined mischief. Naruto caught a glimpse of a younger girl with long dark hair, clutching what appeared to be... She took my special ointment. Hinata's distress was evident. The one I was making for... She trailed off, pressing her fingers together and blushing. Naruto knew that ointment was meant for him. She'd been working on an improved version of the one she'd given him after his match with Kiba. Don't worry, I'll get it back. Naruto created several more clones, ready to launch into pursuit. But before they could move, another voice rang out. Boss, I've got this. A small blur intercepted Hanabi's escape route. Konohamaru struck what was clearly meant to be a dramatic pose but looked more like an enthusiastic wobble. Konohamaru, Naruto grinned. Nice timing. Hanabi skidded to a stop, nearly colliding with the Hokage's grandson. What are you doing here? Helping my rival's friend, of course, Konohamaru declared, striking another pose. Plus, Hinata-sama helped me with my chakra control exercises yesterday. The market collectively held its breath as the Hyuga heiress's little sister faced off against the third's grandson. Several observers, including Kakashi who had somehow not lost his place in his book despite all the chaos, watched with amusement. Fine, Hanabi finally huffed, holding out the ointment jar. But only because you're cute. Crisis averted. The market gradually returned to its normal morning rhythm. Naruto's clones finished delivering ingredients to Ichiraku's, while the original helped Hinata check that her ointment hadn't been damaged in its brief adventure. Thank you, Hinata said softly, carefully storing the jar away. Hanabi-chan has been more energetic lately. Father says she's entering her challenging phase. Youth manifests in many ways, Guy declared, still balancing the tomatoes he'd rescued earlier. Speaking of which, Hinata-chan, your progress with Juho has been most impressive. Thank you. Hinata pressed her fingers together. But Hanabi's been watching my practice sessions. Sometimes I see her trying to copy the movements when she thinks no one's looking. Your sister's got pretty amazing role model to follow. Naruto grinned. That training with Arrow Sennin and bushier brows sensei really paid off. The air around Hinata fluttered with pleased embarrassment at his praise, though she managed to maintain eye contact for a moment longer than usual before looking down. Indeed, Guy finally remembered to return the tomatoes to their rightful owner. Though now we should focus on preparing you for your match against Niji in the finals. Naruto, your youthful spirit will need to burn brighter than ever. He was interrupted by a sudden commotion from Ichiraku's direction. Naruto sensed his clones engaging in what appeared to be a noodle-making competition? Oh no, Naruto groaned. I better go check on that. Thanks for the training, Hinata. I'll make sure to keep my promise about beating Niji. As Naruto rushed off to prevent his clones from reinventing the art of ramen preparation, Kakashi finally closed his book with a thoughtful expression. You know, he said casually to Guy, Minato-sensei would have loved seeing how his son has grown. The springtime of youth blooms in unexpected ways. Guy agreed, watching as Naruto tried to restore order to Ichiraku's kitchen. Though perhaps we should help before they discover how to weaponize ramen broth. The morning's chaos gradually settled into the normal rhythm of village life. Naruto's clones eventually sorted out their culinary creative differences. Hanabi was caught trying to practice Earth-style techniques behind the academy, and somewhere in the Hyuga compound, Niji meditated on his upcoming match. As the sun climbed toward noon, Naruto headed toward his usual training ground, still picking noodle fragments out of his hair. The village hummed with approaching change, tension building as the finals drew closer, whispered concerns about strange movements near the village borders, and the ever-present undercurrent of preparation for what promised to be an extraordinary Chunin exam conclusion. But for now, he focused on the immediate future. Another training session with Jiraiya, the continuing evolution of his techniques, and perhaps most importantly, making sure his clones stayed far away from any more cooking experiments. The morning's adventures had reminded him that strength grew not just from training, but from the connections and experiences that made life in Konoha unique. As he reached the training ground, finding Jiraiya already waiting with his characteristic mix of exasperation and pride, Naruto couldn't help but smile. His match against Niji would come soon enough for now. There was joy in the journey itself. You're late. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow, sniffing the air. And why do you smell like miso? Don't ask, Naruto groaned, creating his training clones. Let's just say I learned that shadow clones, ramen, and competitive spirit don't mix well. The Toad Sage's laughter echoed across the clearing as another day of preparation began, each moment bringing them closer to the challenges that lay ahead. Chapter 9. The finals begin. The pre-dawn air hung heavy over Training Ground 3 as Naruto faced his senseis. 1 week remained until the finals, and both Jiraiya and Guy had insisted on a final evaluation of his progress. Show us everything you've learned. Jiraiya's usual playful demeanor was replaced by serious focus. Don't hold back. Naruto nodded, creating a circle of shadow clones. Over the past month, he'd refined his abilities far beyond what he'd shown in the preliminaries. Each clone moved with practiced fluidity, their movements no longer the wild, uncoordinated style of before. Begin, Guy called out. The clones burst into motion. Instead of rushing in directly, they circled their teachers, manipulating air currents to create subtle disturbances. It was a technique born from countless hours of practice, using minimal chakra to generate multiple small wind distortions rather than obvious powerful gusts. Jiraiya smirked, immediately recognizing the strategy. Not bad, but he cut off as he felt the real attack coming from behind. While the clones' wind manipulation had drawn attention, 3 more had burrowed underground. Dynamic entry! The subterranean clones burst upward, forcing both senseis to dodge. But that too was part of the plan. The airborne disturbances suddenly concentrated, creating a vortex that pulled at their clothes and disrupted their landing. Youth! Guy's eyes blazed with pride as he corrected midair, only to find more clones waiting with prepared strikes. The original Naruto watched intently, coordinating the attack patterns they developed. No more rushing in blindly, each move was calculated, each clone positioned to support the others. When Jiraiya dispersed one group with a water bullet, Another was already moving to exploit the momentary opening. Enough! Jiraiya called after 15 minutes of intense exchange. The remaining clones dispersed, leaving a panting but grinning Naruto. Most excellent. Guy flashed his signature pose. Your flames of youth burn brighter than ever. The kid's definitely ready, Jiraiya agreed, his serious expression melting into a proud smile. Though I notice you didn't use any of your bigger techniques. Naruto rubbed the back of his head. Saving those for the real thing. Besides, you said stealth and strategy were just as important as power, Erosenin. So you do listen sometimes? Jiraiya chuckled. Alright, that's enough for today. Rest up. You'll need your strength for tomorrow's final session. As Naruto turned to leave, Jiraiya's voice took on a more somber tone. One more thing, kid. About your match with Neji. I know. Naruto's expression hardened. I haven't forgotten my promise. The week passed quickly. Final preparations were made, strategies reviewed, and before anyone quite felt ready, the morning of the finals arrived. The stadium buzzed with anticipation. Dignitaries from various nations filled the special sections, including the Kazekage who sat beside the third Hokage. In the competitor's box, Naruto observed his fellow finalists. Gaara stood isolated in one corner, his siblings maintaining a careful distance. Shikamaru looked like he'd rather be watching clouds. Shino remained as inscrutable as ever. The first match will begin shortly. Genma, the new proctor, announced. Naruto Uzumaki and Neji Hyuga, please come down. As Naruto descended the stairs, he caught sight of familiar faces in the crowd. Sakura sat with Ino and Choji. Kakashi and Guy watched from the Jounin section. And there, his heart clenched slightly, was Hinata, sitting with her father and sister. She still moved carefully, her injuries from the preliminaries not fully healed, but her eyes met his with quiet determination. Kick his ass, boss. Konohamaru's voice rang out from somewhere in the stands. Neji already waited in the arena, his posture radiating cold confidence. You should forfeit now, he called as Naruto approached. Fate has already determined this match's outcome. You talk a lot about fate. Naruto's voice carried across the suddenly quiet arena. But I made a promise. On Hinata's blood, I swore I'd win. Still defending that failure? Neji's eyes narrowed. Then let me show you reality. Begin. Genma jumped back as the match started. Naruto immediately created foreshadow clones, spreading out to surround Neji. The Hyuga prodigy activated his Byakugan, settling into the gentle fist stance. This again? Your clones can't deceive these eyes. The clones charged, but instead of attacking directly, they began generating controlled wind currents. Dust and leaves swirled around Neji, who remained unimpressed. Parlor tricks won't work against. He spun suddenly, blocking a strike from behind. What? The disturbed air had masked one clone's approach, making its chakra signature blend with the natural wind patterns. Neji's Byakugan could still see it, but the split-second delay in recognition was telling. Not bad, Neji admitted, dispersing the clone. But futile. He dashed forward, hands blazing with chakra as he systematically eliminated the remaining clones. Naruto created more, this time mixing underground movement with aerial attacks. Each time Neji destroyed one group, another was positioned to capitalize on any momentary opening. But the Hyuga's defense seemed absolute. 8 trigrams, palm rotation. The spinning barrier of chakra decimated another wave of clones. Neji emerged without a scratch, though his breathing had quickened slightly. Is this all you have? He taunted. You can't win with just clones and wind. Maybe not, Naruto grinned, but I'm just getting started. The next wave of clones came with a new strategy. Instead of attacking, they focused entirely on wind manipulation, creating a complex network of air currents throughout the arena. Neji found himself having to expend more chakra with each rotation as the winds fought against his spin. Enough games. Neji charged through the windstorm. You're within range. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. The strikes came with lightning speed. 2 palms. 4, 8, 16. But something was wrong. His attacks weren't connecting properly, The wind currents were actually pushing his hands slightly off course, disrupting the precision needed for clean hits. What? Niji's eyes widened as Naruto continued moving despite taking several strikes. Surprised, Naruto's grin turned fierce. I've been training with a gentle fist user too, you know. Learned a lot about how it works. The implications hit Niji hard. All those training sessions with Hinata, studying the gentle fist's mechanics, learning its weaknesses, you used her to prepare for this fight? Wrong. Naruto's voice held real anger now. She worked hard to grow stronger, just like anyone else. But you were too busy looking down on her to notice. The fight intensified. Niji's superior taijutsu clashed against Naruto's unpredictable combinations of clones and wind manipulation. Every time the Hyuga prodigy thought he had the real Naruto cornered, another current of air would disrupt his stance or mask a clone's approach. But Niji wasn't a prodigy for nothing. He began predicting the wind patterns, using his rotations more strategically. Finally, a perfect palm rotation caught Naruto mid-attack, sending him crashing across the arena. It's over, Niji declared as Naruto struggled to stand. I've sealed most of your chakra points. This is reality, the difference between a failure and a genius. You know, Naruto coughed, wiping blood from his mouth. You talk about fate and genius, but you're really just scared. What did you say? You're scared that all your genius doesn't matter, that someone you called a failure might prove you wrong. Naruto's eyes blazed with determination. Just like you're scared that Hinata might prove you wrong. Silence. Niji's composed mask cracked. You know nothing about the Hyuga clan or the burden of fate. Then tell me, Naruto shouted back. Tell me why you're so angry. And Niji did. The story poured out his father's sacrifice, the caged bird seal, the burden of the branch family. When he finished, silence hung heavy over the arena. I understand, Naruto said quietly, but you're wrong about one thing. Nothing is decided at birth. Red chakra began seeping from his body. Let me show you. The finale was explosive. Naruto's renewed assault, powered by the Nine-Tails chakra and supported by dozens of clones, crashed against Niji's ultimate defense again and again. Wind techniques amplified by demonic chakra created visible blades in the air. It ended with a faint one clone approaching from above while another burst from below. Niji, forced to choose, took out the aerial attack only to meet Naruto's uppercut head-on. Both genin lay in the dirt, exhausted, but only one stood back up. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. The crowd erupted. Above, Hinata dabbed at tears while smiling. Guy wrapped an arm around Kakashi, crying about youth. Jiraiya nodded in satisfaction. How? Niji managed from the ground. How did you get so strong? I failed the graduation exam 3 times, Naruto answered, extending a hand to help him up. But I never stopped trying. That's how I got strong. And that's why Hinata will get strong too, because she never gives up. As medical ninja approached to check on them, Naruto looked up at the Hokage's box. Something felt off about the Kazekage's chakra. Before he could process that hot, feathers began falling from the sky. A powerful sleep genjutsu descended over the stadium. The invasion had begun. Chapter 10. When Leaves Dance. Feathers drifted through the air like gentle snow, but Naruto recognized the danger instantly. Kai. The release technique Jiraiya had drilled into him dispelled the genjutsu's effects. Around the stadium, civilians slumped in their seats while trained shinobi maintained consciousness. A massive explosion rocked the Hokage's box, revealing Orochimaru's deception as he forced the third onto the rooftop. In the competitor's box, Gaara clutched his head in pain. Sand leaked from his gourd, swirling erratically as his siblings moved to escort him. Naruto, Kakashi appeared beside him. Go after Gaara. That instability in his chakra, if he transforms inside the village. But Gigi. The Hokage can handle himself. Kakashi cut him off, then added quietly. And I'll deal with Kabuto personally. Now go. The pursuit through the forest was brief. Naruto caught up to find Kankuro waiting in a clearing, but Shino's timely arrival allowed him to press forward. When he finally reached Gaara, the The sight gave him pause. Sand whirled around the redhead in violent torrents as he clutched his head. Temari stood nearby, fear evident in her stance. "Stay back," she warned. "Mother wants blood." Gaara's voice had transformed into something inhuman. Sand began accumulating around him, attempting to take shape. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Time to show what a month of training had really accomplished. His hands formed a familiar seal.
Multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu.
Dozens of clones appeared, but instead of charging in, they began precise hand movements. The air itself seemed to respond, currents shifting and converging. "What?" Temari's question cut off as she was forced to anchor herself with chakra. Multiple concentrated wind streams slammed into Gaara's sand defenses, not just deflecting the sand, but completely dispersing it.
Impossible.
Gaara's eyes widened as his ultimate defense was literally blown away. Every attempt to gather sand was met with precisely targeted wind bursts that scattered the particles. "You're not the only one who can control things in the air, Gaara." Naruto's clones maintained their assault, creating a complex network of wind currents that kept the sand dispersed. And wind beats sand every time. Gaara's frustrated scream echoed through the forest as he tried forcing more sand from his gourd, attempting to begin his transformation. But Naruto had trained for this exact scenario. No matter how much sand emerged, concentrated wind techniques kept it from accumulating. "Why?" Gaara demanded, his strategy falling apart. "Why are you so strong?" "Because I'm not fighting alone." Naruto charged forward, wind chakra swirling in his palm. The Rasengan formed, but this time he added his wind nature to it, something Jiraiya had strictly forbidden him from using on other Leaf Ninja. Gaara's weakened sand shield couldn't stand against the enhanced Rasengan. The impact sent him flying through several trees, his remaining sand armor completely shattered. As Gaara struggled to rise, Naruto approached slowly. "I get it, you know? Being alone, having everyone fear you. But it doesn't have to stay that way." "I don't understand," Gaara managed, truly vulnerable for the first time in years. "Look." Naruto gestured to where Temari and Kankuro had landed nearby, concern evident in their stances. "You're not alone either." Before Gaara could respond, Naruto stiffened. His heightened wind sensitivity had picked up something from the village, a spike of familiar chakra and killing intent. "Take care of your brother," he told the Sand siblings before creating several clones. "He needs you more than he needs to fight." Using his clones to literally propel himself through the air with wind techniques, Naruto raced back toward the village. The purple barrier atop the building was visible from afar, but what he sensed inside made his blood run cold. The third Hokage was in trouble. Landing on a nearby rooftop, Naruto could see through the barrier. Orochimaru had summoned what appeared to be previous Hokages, but Hiruzen had somehow dealt with them. Now, however, the Snake Sannin had his predecessor cornered. "Too late," Orochimaru gloated, raising the Kusanagi sword. "Die, old man." Time seemed to slow. Naruto couldn't penetrate the barrier, but air could. With everything he'd learned about precise wind control, about shifting the smallest currents with minimal power, focusing harder than he ever had before, Naruto reached out with his wind chakra. He couldn't stop the sword, but maybe, just maybe, the blade thrust forward and shifted, ever so slightly. Hiruzen managed to move just enough that, instead of a fatal blow, it merely grazed his side. And more importantly, the slight trajectory change meant Orochimaru couldn't pull back in time. The Snake Sannin's eyes widened in shock as his own blade continued its altered path, piercing his chest. The barrier dropped as his concentration failed, and Anbu immediately swarmed the rooftop.
Impossible.
Orochimaru choked out before collapsing. Naruto rushed to the third side. "Gigi, are you okay?" "Just tired." Hiruzen managed a weak smile. "Though I suspect I'll be spending some time in the hospital." "Well done, Naruto." As medical ninja arrived to treat the Hokage, Kakashi appeared beside them. "Kabuto has been dealt with," he reported quietly. "The invasion is failing without its leaders." Later, in the hospital, Naruto sat beside the third's bed as the old man gave orders to his former student. Find Tsunade, Hiruzen told Jiraiya. The village needs her medical expertise, and it's time to think about the future. Want me to bring the brat along? Jiraiya nodded toward Naruto. Hey, who are you calling? Yes, Hiruzen interrupted, smiling. I think that would be wise. After all, his eyes twinkled with pride. He's proven himself quite capable today. As Naruto left the hospital with Jiraiya to prepare for their journey, the village was already beginning repairs. The invasion had been costly, but they had survived. And somewhere in the forest, he hoped a certain red-haired boy was beginning to understand what it meant to not be alone. Chapter 11. Aftermath and Search. The sun rose over a changed Konoha. 3 days had passed since the invasion, and while the major fighting had ended with Orochimaru's death, pockets of resistance remained. Sound Ninja, now leaderless and desperate, had scattered into the surrounding forests. Some surrendered, but others, particularly the elite Sound 4, had gone to ground and were launching guerrilla attacks on repair efforts. Naruto stood atop the Hokage monument, surveying the village below. Construction crews were already at work, shinobi using earth techniques to clear debris while civilians began rebuilding. The wind carried snippets of conversation, determination mixed with grief for those lost in the attack. Ready to head out, kid? Jiraiya's voice came from behind him. They were supposed to leave for their search for Tsunade, but the Sound 4 are still out there. Naruto turned to his teacher. Shouldn't we help deal with them first? Already taken care of, Jiraiya grinned. Take a look. He pointed toward the forest's edge, where multiple chakra signatures were clashing. Through the trees, Naruto caught glimpses of what appeared to be an elaborate operation in progress. Shikamaru's shadow techniques stretched between the trees, hurting their targets. Above, Shino's insects formed clouds that forced the Sound Ninja to adjust their movement patterns. And there was that Niji? After your match, the Hyuga prodigy specifically requested to be part of the cleanup operation, Jiraiya explained. Something about proving people can change their fate. He's leading one of the pursuit teams with that cousin of his. Indeed, Naruto could sense both Niji and Hinata's chakra signatures moving in perfect coordination. Their Byakugan abilities made them ideal for tracking the scattered enemies. The whole rookie group volunteered, Jiraiya continued. Even that lazy Nara kid, though he complained it was troublesome before coming up with the entire strategy. They're working in teams with more experienced ninja like Kakashi and Guy. As if on cue, a massive explosion of youth echoed from the forest, followed by the distinct sound of someone being kicked through several trees. That's 3 of the Sound 4 down, Jiraiya counted off. The spider guy fell to Shino's insects yesterday, apparently. Bugs trump spider webs. The two-headed one couldn't handle a combined assault from the Hyuga cousins. And that just now was probably Guy introducing the fat one to his dynamic entry. What about the last one? The one with the flute? Ah, that's the best part. Watch. In a distant clearing, a melodious tune drifted through the air. The female Sound Ninja, Tayuya, was attempting to control her summoned demons with her flute techniques. But something was wrong. Every note she played was disrupted, the sound waves scattered by precise wind currents. Above her, hidden in the trees, Hinata's hands moved in the flowing patterns of Juho, manipulating the air itself to destabilize the sound-based jutsu.
Impossible.
Tayuya snarled, increasing her chakra output. Some failure like you can't. Her rant cut off as shadows suddenly wrapped around her legs. Multiple insects emerged from her flute, having been planted there during the previous day's skirmish. And then, with timing that spoke of extensive planning, Niji emerged from her blind spot. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. The last of the Sound 4 fell, her defeat representing the final organized resistance from Orochimaru's forces. Not bad, Jiraiya nudged his student. The next generation stepping up to protect their village. Now come on, we've got our own mission to handle. As they headed toward the village gates, they passed several restoration projects in progress. The Akimichi clan was using their size-changing techniques to help move large debris, while Yamanaka mine techniques coordinated the civilian workers. Even the Nara clan's shadows were being put to use, holding structures stable while repairs were made. Near the hospital, they encountered Sakura leaving after another healing lesson. Since the invasion, she'd been splitting her time between helping with repairs and studying medical techniques from the remaining doctors. Heading out to find Tsunade-sama? She asked, falling into step with them. The hospital really needs her expertise. Some of the more serious cases are beyond our current medic's abilities. That's the plan, Naruto nodded. How's the old man doing? Stable but stubborn, Sakura sighed. He keeps trying to do paperwork from his hospital bed. The nurses had to confiscate his brushes after they caught him signing documents with his uninjured arm. They reached the gates where Kotetsu and Izumo were maintaining their eternal vigil, albeit from a hastily repaired guard station. Sure you don't want to wait until tomorrow? Izumo asked. The celebration for taking down the Sound Four is tonight. Can't. Jiraiya shook his head. My contacts say Tsunade was recently spotted in Tanzaka town, but she never stays in one place long. We need to move fast. Besides, Naruto grinned, we'll have plenty to celebrate when we bring her back. As they set out, Naruto took one last look at the village. The physical damage would be repaired soon enough. It was the other wounds that would take time to heal. The lost loved ones, the shattered sense of security, the betrayal by supposed allies. But there was hope too. He'd seen it in how quickly everyone had come together, in young ninja rising to new challenges, in former enemies like Gaara beginning to change their paths. Hey Ero Sennin, he called as they took to the trees. Tell me more about this Tsunade person. What makes you think she'll come back? Well, that's a complicated story. Jiraiya settled into lecture mode as they traveled. It starts with three young ninja who became known as the legendary Sannin. Their journey took them through small towns and villages, following rumors and reports of legendary gambling losses. Jiraiya used the travel time to continue Naruto's training, focusing on chakra control and expanding his wind techniques. The key, he explained one evening as they practiced, is understanding that wind isn't just about power. It's about precision and timing. You've got the raw strength, now you need to refine it. They worked on exercises like cutting leaves with wind chakra, but with a twist. The goal was to cut specific patterns or only certain layers while leaving others intact. The training helped with the fine control that had allowed Naruto to affect Orochimaru's sword trajectory through the barrier. A week into their search, they finally picked up a solid lead in a small gambling town. She was here yesterday, the bartender confirmed. Lost big at the tables, then won it all back and then some. Left toward Tanzaku town muttering about some festival. That's our Tsunade, Jiraiya chuckled. Come on kid, we're getting close. As they approached Tanzaka town, neither could have predicted the complications that awaited them. The mission to retrieve a healer would soon become something far more complex, testing not just Naruto's new abilities, but his understanding of what it meant to be a ninja of the leaf. Chapter 12, Legendary Meetings. Tanzaka town bustled with festival preparations despite the late hour. Paper lanterns cast warm light across crowded streets as vendors set up stalls for the coming celebration. Naruto and Jiraiya made their way through the throng, checking bars and gambling halls for their target. There, Jiraiya suddenly stopped outside a particularly rowdy establishment. Feel that chakra? Naruto extended his senses through the wind currents. Among the jumbled signatures of civilians and minor shinobi, two stood out, one sharp and precise, the other massive but carefully controlled. That's her all right. Jiraiya's expression grew serious. Remember what we discussed. Tsunade can be volatile. Let me do the talking. They entered to find a blonde woman demolishing a bottle of sake while a darker-haired woman tried unsuccessfully to moderate her drinking. Tsunade, Jiraiya called out cheerfully. You're looking as young as ever. The blonde's eyes narrowed. Jiraiya, what do you want? Can't an old friend stop by to say hello? Cut the crap. Tsunade downed another cup. You're here about something. Spill it before I decide to throw you through a wall. Naruto studied the legendary medic as Jiraiya pulled up a chair. Despite appearing young, something in her eyes spoke of deep weariness. The wind around her felt heavy, laden with old grief. The village needs you, Jiraiya said simply. Sarutobi-sensei was injured in the invasion. So the old man finally bit off more than he could chew? Tsunade's bitter laugh held no humor. Not my problem. Find another medic. He killed Orochimaru. That got her attention. The sake cup paused halfway to her lips. What? Well, technically, Jiraiya glanced at Naruto. He had some help, but the snake's dead. Really dead this time. Humph. Good riddance. Tsunade finally seemed to notice Naruto. Who's the brat? Naruto Uzumaki, he answered before Jiraiya could. And the old man needs your help. The village needs your help. The village? She spat the word. What has the village ever done except take everything I loved? My brother, Dan, all dead for what? Some idealistic dream. The temperature in the bar seemed to drop. Even civilians sensed the tension, quietly moving away from their corner. Lady Tsunade, her companion tried to intervene. Perhaps we should.
No, Sisune.
They need to hear this. Tsunade's eyes blazed with old pain. The title of Hokage is a fool's game. Only idiots chase that dream. Something snapped in Naruto. The wind around them stirred ominously. Take that back. Excuse me? I said take it back. Naruto slammed his hands on the table. The old man nearly died protecting the village, protecting everyone's dreams. And you sit here drinking and calling him a fool. Naruto, Jiraiya warned, but Tsunade was already standing. Outside, she growled. Now. The confrontation spilled into a nearby empty lot. Tsunade cracked her knuckles while Naruto created shadow clones. One finger, she declared. That's all I'll need to put you in your place, brat. The clones charged, but instead of attacking directly, they began generating wind currents. Tsunade's first finger flick dispersed 3 clones and cratered the ground, but the disturbed air masked the approach of others. Not bad, she admitted, evading a series of coordinated strikes, but not good enough. Her counterattack was devastating. One finger strike created a shockwave that dispersed most of the remaining clones. But Naruto had been training for this, using the wind itself to redirect and dampen impact forces. The hell? Tsunade's eyes widened as her next strike didn't land quite as intended. Wind manipulation at this level? I'm not done yet. Naruto formed his signature technique, wind chakra swirling visibly around the Rasengan. Tsunade's expression shifted from surprise to shock as she recognized the jutsu. Her counterpunch carried enough force to shatter stone, meeting Naruto's attack head-on. The resulting explosion sent both fighters skidding backward. Tsunade looked at her slightly scratched finger with disbelief. Where did you learn that technique? Erosenin taught me. Naruto created more clones. Just like the old man taught him. Just like he taught Orochimaru and you. Because that's what the village is. People believing in each other. Passing on their dreams. Dreams get people killed. Tsunade shot back, but something had changed in her voice. Maybe, Naruto acknowledged, but giving up on them? That's worse than death. The old man never gave up. Even against Orochimaru, he fought to protect everyone's dreams. And I'll never give up either, because that's my ninja way. The wind swirled around him, visible even to civilian eyes as it responded to his emotions. In that moment, Tsunade saw someone else standing there. A young man with spiky yellow hair and an unshakable determination. You're really serious about becoming Hokage, aren't you? She asked quietly. Believe it, and I'll prove it right now. Naruto began forming another Rasengan, this time without clones. The wind nature chakra made it unstable, threatening to explode. That's enough, Jiraiya finally intervened. I think you've made your point, kid. Tsunade stared at Naruto for a long moment before turning away. 1 week. Huh. Give me 1 week. If you can master that technique completely, adding wind nature without it blowing up in your face. I'll admit I was wrong about the Hokage title. She reached for her necklace. I'll even throw in a bonus. Lady Tsunade, Shizune protested. That necklace is my foolish bet to make. Tsunade cut her off. Well, brat, do we have a deal? You better believe it. Naruto grinned. And when I win, You're coming back to help the old man. The next week proved intensely challenging. While Tsunade watched from a distance, claiming she was just observing his likely failure, Naruto worked himself to exhaustion trying to stabilize the wind-enhanced Rasengan. The problem, Jiraiya explained during one training session, is that wind nature wants to escape, to cut and slice. You need to contain that power while maintaining the Rasengan's rotating force. Naruto created hundreds of clones daily, each practicing different aspects of the technique. Some worked on pure wind manipulation, others on Rasengan formation, trying to find the perfect balance. Meanwhile, Tsunade spent her evenings drinking and gambling, but Naruto noticed her watching his progress with increasing interest. Sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, her hand would stray to the necklace she'd wagered. On the 6th day, something clicked. A clone performing the 10,000th attempt suddenly maintained the technique for several seconds before dispersing. "That's it!" Naruto exclaimed, the clone's memory transferring the sensation. The wind needs to spiral with the chakra, not against it. He formed the Rasengan, then carefully began adding his wind nature. Instead of trying to contain the cutting force, he wove it into the rotation, creating a technique that looked like a miniature tornado compressed into a sphere. "Interesting approach," Jiraiya nodded approvingly. "Rather than fighting the wind's nature, you're working with it, just like you did against Gaara's sand." The next morning, Naruto demonstrated the completed technique by cleanly slicing through a series of boulders Tsunade had set up. The cuts were perfectly smooth, the wind-enhanced Rasengan maintaining stability throughout. "Well?" he asked as the last boulder fell. "Ready to admit you were wrong about the Hokage title?" Tsunade was quiet for a long moment before removing her necklace. "You really are something else, brat." She placed the crystal around his neck. "All right, you win. Let's go help that stubborn old man." The return journey to Konoha was considerably livelier than their search had been. Tsunade grilled Naruto about the invasion, particularly his role in deflecting Orochimaru's final attack. "Manipulating wind through a barrier like that," she shook her head. "Even I wouldn't have thought it possible. You've got your father's talent for the impossible." "My father?" Naruto perked up, but both Sannin suddenly became very interested in discussing the weather. They arrived to find the village's physical reconstruction largely complete. The third was still in the hospital but improving, and the remaining sound forces had been completely cleaned up. "Welcome back," Hiruzen smiled as they entered his room. "And thank you for coming, Tsunade." "Save it, sensei." She tried to sound gruff but couldn't quite manage it. "Let's see what trouble you've gotten yourself into this time." As she began her medical examination, Naruto slipped out to let them talk. The mission was complete, but somehow he knew this was just the beginning. Changes were coming to Konoha, and he intended to be ready for them. The wind whispered of approaching challenges, but for now, he had a new technique to master and a village to help rebuild. The future could wait just a little longer. Chapter 13. Shifting Currents. The weeks following Tsunade's return brought rapid changes to Konoha. Under her decisive leadership, the hospital reorganized its protocols, implementing new training programs for medical ninja. The third, though still recovering, had begun sharing more administrative duties with his former student, much to the council's mixed reactions. Naruto noticed the subtle shifts in village dynamics during his daily training. More foreign merchants had returned, reconstruction projects were finishing ahead of schedule, and there was a palpable sense of renewal in the air. But beneath the surface, not all changes were positive. Sasuke had grown increasingly withdrawn since the invasion. While others celebrated victory over Sound and Sand, the last Uchiha seemed haunted by his own performance during the crisis. Naruto had caught him several times at the training grounds well past midnight, hands bloodied from striking posts, Sharingan active as he drilled techniques repeatedly. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Naruto said one evening, bringing his teammates some water. "Even the wind needs to rest sometimes." Sasuke didn't answer immediately, studying the new crystal necklace Naruto wore. "That technique you used against Gaara," he finally spoke. "Show it to me." "The wind-enhanced Rasengan? It's not really suited for—" "I don't care about the technique itself," Sasuke interrupted. I want to understand how you got so strong. So quickly. His fists clenched. While I've been standing still. That's not true, Naruto protested. You've mastered the Chidori. Your Sharingan is stronger. And what good did it do against real threats? Sasuke's voice was bitter. Gaara would have killed me if you hadn't intervened. I couldn't do anything against those sound ninja attacking the village. Even you managed to help take down Orochimaru while He trailed off, frustration evident. Naruto considered his words carefully. The wind currents around them carried Sasuke's turbulent emotions. Anger, shame, and underneath it all, fear. Fear of inadequacy, of failing to meet his goals. You know, Naruto sat down beside his friend. When I was training with Ero Sennin and Tsunade-bachan, they told me something interesting about the fourth Hokage. Apparently, he didn't create the Rasengan in a day. It took him 3 years with lots of failures along the way. Sasuke glanced at him skeptically. The point is, Naruto continued, strength doesn't come all at once. It's built step by step with help from others. That's what makes Konoha different from someone like Orochimaru. We grow stronger together. And what if that's not enough? Sasuke activated his Sharingan, staring at his own hands. What if working together, following the village's path, only leads to being too weak when it matters most? Then we find a better way. Naruto stood up. Together. That's what teammates do. Before Sasuke could respond, an ANBU appeared in a swirl of leaves. Uzumaki Naruto, Uchiha Sasuke. The Hokage requires your presence. They found not only the third waiting in his office but also Tsunade and, surprisingly, Hyuga Hayashi. The atmosphere was tense. Thank you for coming, Hiruzen began. We've received disturbing intelligence that needs to be addressed immediately. He nodded to Hayashi. Our scouts have detected unusual activity in several abandoned Uchiha outposts near the Land of Rivers, the Hyuga clan head reported. Initially, we believed they were simply looters. However, deeper investigation revealed something more concerning: evidence of experiments combining Sharingan research with cursed seal technology. Sasuke's head snapped up. But Orochimaru is dead. Yes, Tsunade took over, but he wasn't working alone. We've confirmed that several of his former test subjects have banded together, led by someone with intimate knowledge of his research. They're attempting to continue his work, specifically focusing on bloodline theft and enhancement. More importantly, the third added gravely, they appear to be specifically interested in both of you. Us? Naruto asked. What do they want with me? Your unprecedented wind nature control, Tsunade explained, combined with your unique chakra properties. As for Sasuke, well, they want the Sharingan, Sasuke finished flatly, just like everyone else. We're telling you this not just as a warning, Hiruzen's voice grew stern, but because we need your help. These remnants of Orochimaru's work must be eliminated before they can grow stronger. However, given their interest in both of you, we believe they may attempt to make contact. You want us as bait, Sasuke deduced. More like undercover agents, Tsunade corrected. We need to know who else was involved in Orochimaru's research, how much they know, and what other bases they might be operating from. Information that would be difficult to obtain through conventional means. This is, of course, an S-rank mission, Hiruzen added. One that carries significant personal risk. You're both free to decline. Naruto and Sasuke exchanged looks. In that moment, something passed between them, an understanding of the stakes involved. I'm in, Naruto declared. These guys need to be stopped before they hurt anyone else. Sasuke was quiet for a moment longer. These outposts? Their former Uchiha properties? Yes, Hayashi confirmed, which is partly why we need your involvement. Your blood right might grant access to areas others can't reach. Then I'll do it. Sasuke's eyes hardened. Those places don't belong to traitors and grave robbers. The mission parameters were quickly established. They would continue their normal routines while ANBU leaked carefully controlled information about their training schedules and patrol routes. A special squad led by Kakashi would shadow them, waiting to intervene if things went wrong. One more thing, Tsunade added as they prepared to leave. We have reason to believe at least one of the group's leaders is a former hidden cloud ninja who specialized in bloodline integration experiments. Be extremely careful. They may have capabilities we haven't anticipated. As they left the tower, Naruto noticed Sasuke seemed more focused than he had in weeks. The aimless frustration had been replaced by determined purpose. You know, Naruto ventured, this could be really dangerous. Good. Sasuke's reply was firm. I'm tired of reacting to threats. It's time to face them head-on. He paused, then added, together, right? Naruto grinned. Believe it, though we should probably work on our teamwork before things get serious. Want to spar? Actually, Sasuke activated his Sharingan, but this time with a slight smirk. I'd like to learn more about how you control those wind currents. If we're facing unknown enemies, new techniques could be useful. As they headed to the training grounds, Naruto felt the wind shifting around them. Change was coming, but not in the way their enemies expected. This time, they would be ready. In the shadows nearby, a figure with unusual chakra signatures watched them go, then disappeared in a flicker of electricity. The game was about to begin. Chapter 14, Thunder's Echo. Dawn found Naruto and Sasuke already at Training Ground 3, continuing the previous evening's work. Scattered leaves danced in controlled patterns as Naruto demonstrated the basics of wind manipulation. It's not just about pushing air around, he explained, guiding a spiral of leaves through an intricate pattern. You have to feel the currents, understand how they want to move naturally. Then you can guide them instead of forcing them. Sasuke's Sharingan tracked the chakra flow intently. The patterns are similar to fire manipulation, but more fluid, less direct. Exactly. Fire wants to expand and consume. Wind wants to flow and cut. They're different, but… Naruto broke off suddenly, his enhanced sensitivity to air currents detecting something amiss. Someone's watching us. Upper left, Sasuke murmured, his eyes shifting slightly. Near the tall oak. Chakra signature is unusual. Neither boy moved abruptly, maintaining the appearance of continued training while subtly preparing for combat. Their morning sessions had drawn observers before ANBU, fellow ninja, even some civilian admirers. But this felt different. The wind carried traces of ozone, like the aftermath of lightning. A slow clap broke the tension. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman in her early 30s with stark white hair and tribal-style lightning bolt tattoos running down her arms. Her forehead protector bore the scratched emblem of Kimogakure. Impressive awareness, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Especially you, young wind user. Not many could detect my presence so quickly. Former cloud ninja out for an early morning stroll? Naruto asked casually, though his chakra was already pooling in preparation for shadow clones. Former is such an ugly word, she sighed. I prefer independently employed. But where are my manners? I am Rakurai. And you too, her gaze sharpened, are exactly who I've been hoping to meet. Let me guess, Sasuke's voice dripped sarcasm. You're interested in our unique abilities. Direct and perceptive. Wonderful. Rakurai began slowly circling them, her movements liquid smooth. Indeed, my research group has taken quite an interest in your recent achievements, particularly that fascinating display during the invasion. She gestured at Naruto. Wind manipulation beyond anything seen since the era of the first Hokage. Her eyes slid to Sasuke, and the legendary Sharingan, finally beginning to show its true potential. Such fascinating subjects for study. If you're trying to recruit us, Naruto growled, you're wasting your time. Recruit? Oh no, dear boy. I'm offering you something far more valuable. Understanding. Her smile widened. Did you know the second Hokage had theories about combining elemental chakra natures with bloodline abilities? Fascinating research, but so limited by the ethical constraints of his time. You mean like Orochimaru's experiments? Sasuke's hands tensed, ready for seals. We've seen how well those turned out. Orochimaru was brilliant but flawed. Rakurai shook her head. Too focused on personal immortality, on possessing power rather than truly understanding it. My colleagues and I have more refined goals. The air crackled with static electricity as she raised one tattooed arm. For instance, what happens when you introduce lightning nature into the chakra pathways of a Hyuga? How does wind chakra interact with the unique properties of the Sharingan? The possibilities are endless. You're insane, Naruto stated flatly, but Rakurai just laughed. Insanity is refusing to pursue knowledge out of fear or arbitrary moral constraints. Think about it, both of you have already broken conventional limits. Why stop there? She reached into her vest and withdrew 2 scrolls, tossing them at the boy's feet. These contain just a taste of what we've discovered. Read them, consider our offer. When you're ready to learn more. She formed a single seal, and her body began to crackle with electricity. You'll know where to find us. She vanished in a flash of lightning, leaving behind only the smell of ozone and 2 innocuous-looking scrolls. After Rakurai's departure, Kakashi and the ANBU conducted a thorough sweep of the training ground. Despite her flashy exit, they found minimal trace evidence, just scattered electromagnetic disturbances and a few scorched leaves. She's good, Kakashi admitted, uncovering his Sharingan to examine the area more closely. The lightning release transportation technique she used is advanced, but it's not masking any other traces. No additional explosive tags, no hidden observers, no backup team. That seems careless, Sasuke observed, still scanning the treeline. Coming alone to approach 2 potential hostiles? Unless she wasn't alone. Naruto closed his eyes, extending his wind sense to its limits. The currents carried lingering traces of ozone, but also something else. There's a weird disturbance in the air patterns about half a kilometer east, like something's been continuously disrupting the natural flow. Kakashi signaled the ANBU, who disappeared in silent blurs. Good catch. What else? The wind feels heavy in certain spots, not like normal humidity or pressure changes. Naruto struggled to describe the sensation, almost like there are holes where it doesn't want to flow properly. Sensor barriers, one of the returning ANBU reported. Sophisticated ones. They're designed to create dead zones in standard detection techniques. We would have missed them completely without knowing where to look. So she had backup, Sasuke concluded, and they're still watching. Most likely, Kakashi smiled, but his tone was serious, which means this is an excellent opportunity to feed them exactly what we want them to see. Naruto, Sasuke, proceed with your training session. Make it look good, but not too good. Show interest in those scrolls, but not enough to seem eager. The boys resumed their positions, now hyper-aware of their audience. Naruto continued demonstrating wind manipulation principles, but kept the techniques basic, nothing approaching the level he'd shown during the invasion. Sasuke maintained his usual stoic demeanor while asking appropriately analytical questions. After about an hour, they finally noticed the scrolls still lying where Rakurai had dropped them. Their performance of cautious curiosity would have impressed even Konoha's theater troupe. These are actually pretty interesting, Naruto mused loudly as they examined the contents. Look at these diagrams of wind current manipulation. Some of these principles aren't too different from what I've been figuring out. Sasuke made a show of studying the material with his Sharingan. The theoretical framework is solid, not like the usual tricks and shortcuts most missing nin try to peddle. Their observers took the bait. The disturbances in the wind currents shifted subtly, moving closer to better monitor their reactions. Later that afternoon, they met with Tsunade, the third, and a select group of Jonin to review the encounter and plan their next moves. The scrolls were being carefully analyzed by the cryptology department, while Inoichi Yamanaka examined them for hidden mental triggers or genjutsu traps. The technical content is genuine, Shikaku Nara reported, spreading out several pages of analysis. These aren't just random theories thrown together to look impressive. Someone with extensive knowledge of chakra systems and bloodline limits helped compile this research. Could it be actual material from Orochimaru's archives? Asuma asked. Some of it, yes. Tsunade traced a familiar equation. I recognize his notation style in parts. But there's newer material too, likely developed after he left Konoha. The question is, how did they get it? More importantly, Ibiki Marino interjected. Why show their hands so openly? Missing Nin conducting illegal research don't usually advertise their presence to hidden villages. Unless they're that confident in their position, Sasuke pointed out, or they need something specific enough to make the risk worthwhile. Naruto had been unusually quiet, studying the way his wind chakra interacted with the scroll's paper. There was something about the material itself that bothered him, but he couldn't quite place it. Naruto, the third prompted gently, you seem troubled. There's something off about these scrolls, he finally said. The wind doesn't flow right around them. At first I thought it was just some kind of security seal, but he channeled a tiny amount of wind chakra into the paper, watching how it dispersed. It's like they're designed to collect data, not just about who reads them, but about how we use chakra while examining them. Tsunade's eyes widened. Clever. They're not just testing our interest, they're actively gathering intelligence on your abilities. She turned to Shikaku. Have the analysis team check for chakra-reactive elements in the paper itself, and get me a detailed breakdown of every person who's handled these scrolls since they entered the village. Already in progress. The Nara clan head nodded. But this does give us an opportunity. If they're collecting data, we can control what data they receive, Kakashi finished. Feed them carefully selected information while gathering intelligence of our own. The strategy session stretched into the evening as they mapped out contingencies and counterintelligence measures. The third's experience with Orochimaru's methods proved invaluable in anticipating potential traps and manipulations. Remember, he cautioned as they wrapped up, these people aren't just missing Nin seeking power, they're researchers, methodical and patient. Every interaction will be analyzed, every response measured. We must be equally thorough in our deception. As they left the tower, Naruto noticed Sasuke seemed deep in thought. You okay? Just thinking about Rakurai's technique, Sasuke replied. The way she used lightning release for transportation. It was similar to something in my clan's records. An old collaboration between the Uchiha and Kumo, before the villages became fully segregated. You think she learned it from those records? From the outposts they're supposedly using? Possibly, which means they may have access to other clan techniques as well. Sasuke's expression darkened. Techniques that were supposed to be sealed away after that night. Naruto understood the implications. If these researchers had indeed breached the old Uchiha strongholds, they could have acquired all sorts of dangerous knowledge. Knowledge that Itachi had apparently thought better left buried. We'll stop them, he promised. Whatever they're planning, however much they think they know, we'll shut them down. Agreed. Sasuke activated his Sharingan briefly, scanning the evening shadows. But first, we need to deal with our shadows. They're still watching. Good. Naruto grinned. Let's give them something to watch. They spent the next hour conducting an elaborate training session, carefully crafting the appearance of two talented young ninja, exploring new concepts from the mysterious scrolls. Just earnest enough to seem genuine, just cautious enough to appear natural. Their audience remained hidden, but Naruto's wind sense detected subtle shifts in their surveillance pattern. They were hooked. The game was on, and both sides thought they were. The players rather than the pieces. Only time would tell who was truly moving the board. Chapter 15, Threads of Deception. The next few days settled into a carefully orchestrated routine. Each morning, Naruto and Sasuke would arrive at different training grounds, making a show of studying the mysterious scrolls while practicing increasingly experimental techniques. In reality, every move was calculated, designed to feed their hidden observers exactly what Konoha wanted them to see. They're getting bolder, Naruto muttered during one such session, his wind sense detecting multiple surveillance points. 3. No for observers today. They're trying to surround us. Sasuke maintained his focus on the training dummy he was attacking, voice low. ANBU counted 5 actually. One's using some kind of chakra suppression technique you can't detect yet. This was part of their real training, learning to communicate vital information while appearing to be focused entirely on practice. Kakashi had drilled them relentlessly on maintaining natural behavior under surveillance. Your stance is too rigid, Sasuke critiqued loudly for their audience's benefit. You're still treating wind like it's a weapon to be controlled rather than a force to be guided. Naruto made a show of adjusting his form, using the movement to scan another section of the training ground. The wind currents revealed subtle disturbances, more of those strange sensor barriers, gradually closing in day by day. Better, Sasuke approved. Now try. A flash of white hair interrupted them as Rakurai materialized in a crack of electricity. Unlike her first appearance, this time she wasn't alone. A tall man with burn scars covering half his face stood slightly behind her, his Hittite bearing the scratched symbol of Iwagakure. Good morning, boys. Rakurai's smile was bright but predatory. I hope you don't mind us dropping in. My colleague was quite interested in your progress with those scrolls. We mind, Naruto stated flatly, though his hostile tone was part of their act. They needed to maintain believable resistance while showing just enough interest to keep the researchers engaged. Now, the scarred man's voice was surprisingly gentle. We're all colleagues here, pursuing the advancement of ninja arts. Call me Kazan. He gestured at the scrolls tucked into Sasuke's belt. I see you've been studying our research. Any interesting insights? Some, Sasuke replied coldly, along with several obvious flaws in your theoretical framework. Oh, Kazan's remaining eyebrow rose. Do tell. Your calculations for chakra pathway modification ignore the natural limitations of the human body. Trying to artificially expand them would kill most subjects. Sasuke's criticism was carefully crafted, showing enough expertise to interest them while pointing out flaws their own research had likely already discovered and solved. Ah, but that's where you're thinking too conventionally. Kazan pulled out a notebook sketching rapid diagrams. Consider this approach instead. The next hour became a complex dance of information exchange. Kazan and Rakurai presented increasingly sophisticated theories, while Naruto and Sasuke carefully measured their responses, showing just enough comprehension and interest to be credible, while maintaining an edge of skepticism. Your grasp of chakra theory is impressive, Kazan noted, watching Naruto demonstrate a basic wind manipulation exercise, especially for someone who learned primarily through intuition rather than formal study. The wind speaks, if you know how to listen, Naruto shrugged, the cryptic response masking how closely he was monitoring their observers' positions through his wind sense. The surveillance team had drawn closer during the conversation, likely recording everything. Poetic and practical, Rakurai laughed. You remind me of the fourth Raikage, actually. He had a similar instinctive grasp of lightning nature. Such a shame politics and village boundaries keep such knowledge segregated. Is that why you left your villages? Sasuke asked, voice carefully neutral. To pursue research without restrictions? Among other reasons. Kazan's scarred face twisted in what might have been a smile, though I prefer to think of it as transcending artificial boundaries rather than abandoning them. After all, nature itself doesn't recognize political borders. Nature also has limits, Naruto countered, thinking of Orochimaru's grotesque experiments, things that shouldn't be crossed. Limits exist to be understood, not feared, Rakurai waved dismissively. Speaking of which, she produced 2 more scrolls, these ones sealed with complex arrays. Consider these a gesture of good faith, more advanced applications of the theories you've been studying. And what do you want in return? Sasuke's suspicion wasn't entirely feigned. Simply, feedback. Kazan spread his hands. Fresh perspectives from 2 of the most promising young ninja we've encountered in years. Think of it as peer review. We'll think about it. Naruto took the scrolls cautiously, noting how his wind chakra reacted to the seals. More monitoring devices, but more sophisticated than the last ones. That's all we ask, Rakurai smiled. For now. She formed her lightning transportation seal. Oh, and do be careful with those scrolls. Some of the techniques described are volatile in untrained hands. They disappeared in another flash of electricity, leaving behind the familiar scent of ozone and far more questions than answers. Moments later, Kakashi and a full ANBU squad materialized. Well, their sensei mused. That was enlightening. Good work maintaining the cover, both of you. They're planning something bigger, Sasuke stated flatly. This was too elaborate just for recruitment. Agreed. One of the ANBU was that Yamato's voice stepped forward. The surveillance pattern has changed. They're not just observing anymore, they're creating a net. Naruto closed his eyes, extending his wind sense to its absolute limits. The air currents painted a disturbing picture. Those sensor barriers, they're not just for watching us. They're building something layer by layer, like a giant seal array spread across the entire training ground. Can you map it? Kakashi asked sharply. I think so, but I'll need help. Naruto created several shadow clones. The wind flows differently through each layer. If we can track the disturbances. The next hour was spent carefully documenting the invisible array while maintaining the appearance of normal training. The picture that emerged was troubling. It's a containment seal, Yamato finally concluded, designed to activate on some kind of trigger and create a totally isolated space. Perfect for capturing test subjects, Sasuke finished grimly. They're not recruiting, they're hunting. But we can use this, Naruto realized. If we know their trap, we can prepare our own, Kakashi smiled. Excellent work, both of you. Let's report to the Hokage. I believe it's time to move to the next phase of the operation. As they headed toward the tower, Naruto felt the wind currents shift subtly. Their observers were following, just as planned. The researchers thought they were drawing their targets into an elaborate trap, never suspecting they were being led into one instead. The real question was, who else was watching the Watchers? Chapter 16. Gathering Storm. The Hokage's office was unusually crowded that evening. Beyond the standard ANBU guards, representatives from multiple departments crowded the space. Intelligence, Barrier Team, Medical Corps, and even several clan heads. The new scrolls from Rakurai and Kazan lay sealed in a containment field at the center of the third's desk. The sensor net is far more extensive than we initially believed, Hayashi Hyuga reported, his Byakugan active as he studied a large map of Konoha. Similar barrier arrays have been detected in at least 7 different locations throughout the village, all centered around areas where Naruto and Sasuke frequently train. Not just training grounds, Shikaku Nara added, marking additional points on the map. They've placed nodes near the hospital, the academy, even the marketplace. It's a village-wide containment system designed to activate in sequence. Like a chain reaction, Tsunade frowned, examining the pattern. Each seal array triggering the next, creating a cascade of isolated spaces. But what's the purpose? Why go to such elaborate lengths? Because they're not just after us? Naruto realized, watching the wind currents flow around the marked locations. Something about the pattern nagged at his memory. These positions, they're not random. They're following the village's natural chakra flow lines. Sasuke activated his Sharingan, studying the map intently. He's right. The arrays are positioned at major chakra convergence points, places where the village's protective barriers are naturally strongest. Which means they're not trying to break in, Kakashi concluded. They're trying to break out. Or rather, they're trying to break something else out, the third finished grimly. Something that's already here. A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. If these researchers had access to Orochimaru's old records, they might know about experiments and sealed specimens still hidden within Konoha itself. We need to accelerate our timeline, Ibiki spoke up from his corner. If they've already infiltrated this deeply, we can't risk waiting for them to make the first move. Agreed. Tsunade turned to Naruto and Sasuke. How confident are you in maintaining your cover under increased scrutiny? Because what we're about to propose will put you both at significant risk. We can handle it, Sasuke replied without hesitation. Naruto nodded in agreement, though he noticed Kakashi's slight tension at their quick acceptance. Very well. The third raised his hand, and 4 more ANBU appeared, these bearing the distinctive masks of Hunter Nin. Operation Shadow Wind is now active. All department heads, proceed with Phase 1 preparations. What followed was an intense strategy session that stretched late into the night. Every detail had to be perfect, every contingency planned for. They were dealing with enemies who had not only Orochimaru's research but apparently extensive knowledge of Konoha's internal systems. The key, Shikaku explained, is making them think their plan is succeeding while actually leading them into our counterattack. Naruto, your wind sense will be crucial for this. We need you to. The planning continued for hours, with various specialists contributing their expertise. Naruto found himself working closely with the barrier team, learning how his wind manipulation could interact with different types of seals. Sasuke spent time with the hunter Nin, studying their tracking techniques. There's something else you should both know, Tsunade said as the meeting finally wound down. Given the scale of this operation and the potential risks involved, the council has approved an unprecedented measure. She handed them each a scroll bearing the official seal of Konoha. Upon successful completion of this mission, you will both be field promoted to Chunin rank. But the exams, Naruto started, were interrupted by invasion, the third reminded them. And while we would normally wait for the next scheduled examination period, these are not normal circumstances. You've both demonstrated the necessary skills and judgment. Consider this your practical exam. As they left the tower well past midnight, Naruto noticed Sasuke seemed preoccupied. What's wrong? This is what we've been working toward, right? It's not that. Sasuke glanced at the stars. Something Kazan said keeps bothering me, about transcending boundaries rather than abandoning them. It reminded me of. He trailed off, but Naruto understood. The words echoed uncomfortably close to things Itachi had once said, according to the old police reports. You think they might be connected to him? I don't know. But these researchers have accessed Uchiha records, have knowledge of forbidden techniques, and are specifically interested in both of us. It can't be coincidence. A cold wind swept through the empty streets, carrying whispers of approaching change. Their observers were still out there, watching from the shadows, but for once Naruto was more concerned about what they weren't seeing. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation disguised as routine. On the surface, Naruto and Sasuke continued their visible training while showing increasing interest in the researcher's scrolls. But beneath that facade, an elaborate trap was being laid. Your wind manipulation is improving, Kakashi commented during one session. His visible eye curved in a smile while his hands flickered through ANBU sign language, conveying the real message. Barrier teams in position, awaiting signal. Thanks, Sensei. Naruto replied cheerfully while his own hands responded. Wind disturbance detected northeast, new barrier array being constructed. They had developed an entire secondary language of meaningful glances, casual gestures, and seemingly random training patterns. Every movement conveyed information, every conversation had multiple layers. The strain of maintaining constant vigilance while appearing normal was exhausting, but they couldn't risk breaking character. Their observers had indeed grown bolder, now maintaining nearly continuous surveillance. They're testing our awareness, Sasuke muttered during a brief water break, seeing how much we can detect, how we respond to different types of monitoring. Let them test, Naruto grinned, though his eyes were serious. The more they think they know about our capabilities, the better our surprise will be. But as the days stretched on, both boys noticed subtle changes in the village's atmosphere. More foreign faces in the crowds, more unexplained power fluctuations, more strange disturbances in the natural flow of chakra through Konoha's streets. They're not just observing anymore, Naruto reported during one secure briefing. The wind carries whispers of preparation. Whatever they're planning, it's happening soon. Agreed. Hayashi's Byakugan scanned another section of the village's chakra network. The barrier arrays are nearly complete. They're just waiting for the right moment to activate them. Then we give them that moment, Tsunade declared. On our terms, not theirs. The plan was set in motion. Over the next few days, Naruto and Sasuke would show increasing mastery of the techniques described in the research scrolls, drawing their observers closer with the promise of successful experiments. Remember, Kakashi cautioned as they prepared for what would likely be their final practice session. No matter what happens, maintain your cover until the signal. We only get one chance at this. We know. Sasuke's eyes held grim determination. We won't fail. As they headed to the training ground that morning, Naruto felt the wind currents singing with tension. Change was coming, faster than anyone had anticipated. But this time they were ready. Chapter 17, Convergence. Dawn broke over Konoha with an unusual stillness. The village's natural wind currents, typically active with morning temperature changes, felt oddly constrained. Naruto had noticed this growing effect over the past weeks as more barrier seals were placed. But today it was particularly pronounced. "It's time," he reported to the assembled team in the Hokage's office. "The wind patterns are almost completely disrupted by their seal network. Whatever they're planning, it has to be soon." "Agreed." Hayashi's Byakugan scanned the village's chakra flows. "The arrays are fully charged. They're just waiting for the right moment to activate them." The third exhaled a long stream of smoke from his pipe, studying the village map where their enemy's seal points had been marked. "Then we proceed as planned. Naruto, Sasuke, you know what to do." The boys nodded grimly. They'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, carefully maintaining their cover while gathering intelligence. Now it was time to turn the tables. "Remember," Kakashi cautioned as they prepared to leave, "timing is critical. We need them to commit fully to their plan before we spring our counter." The morning proceeded according to their established routine. Naruto and Sasuke arrived at their usual training ground, making a show of studying the research scrolls while practicing increasingly advanced techniques. Their observers, now numbering nearly a dozen, watched from concealed positions around the area. "They're getting ready to move," Naruto murmured, sensing subtle shifts in the barrier seals. "The wind disruption is intensifying." Sasuke's Sharingan caught the faint shimmer of chakra as their enemies began activating the first array. "Here we go." Right on cue, Rakurai and Kazan appeared in their signature flash of lightning. This time, they brought reinforcements, for more missing Nin emerged from the shadows, each bearing signs of forbidden experimentation. "Good morning, boys." Rakurai's cheerful tone carried an edge of anticipation. "I hope you don't mind, but some of our other colleagues were very interested in meeting you. Especially after your impressive progress with our research materials," Kazan added smoothly. "We believe you're ready for more advanced studies." "You mean we're ready to become your test subjects?" Sasuke's voice dripped contempt. "Right on script." "Such a harsh way to put it," Rakurai sighed. "We prefer to think of it as mutual advancement. After all, you've already experienced the benefits of our methods." She gestured at the scrolls they'd provided. "Those exercises have enhanced your abilities considerably. Imagine what you could achieve with full access to our research." "Thanks, but we'll pass." Naruto dropped into a fighting stance. "We've seen enough of Orochimaru's research methods already." Orochimaru was a crude amateur. One of the new missing Nin sneered. "Our techniques are far more sophisticated. And far less optional." Kazan's gentle demeanor vanished as he formed a complex seal. "The barrier arrays are complete. This entire area is now isolated from the village's security network." The air shimmered as multiple containment fields sprang to life, creating a cascade of sealed spaces just as they'd predicted. What their enemies didn't realize was that Konoha's forces had spent weeks preparing for exactly this scenario. "Now then," Rakurai's hands crackled with electricity. "Shall we begin our demonstration?" "Actually," Naruto grinned, "we've got a demonstration of our own." The wind, which had seemed completely suppressed by the barrier seals, suddenly roared to life. Over the past weeks, Naruto hadn't been fighting the disruption. He'd been learning its patterns, finding its weaknesses. Now he turned that knowledge against their enemies, using the very structure of their barrier array to amplify his wind manipulation. Simultaneously, Sasuke's Sharingan activated, not just copying techniques but reading the precise chakra flows, maintaining the containment field. Together, they began systematically disrupting key points in the array. Their enemies reacted quickly, but found themselves facing not just two young ninja, but a carefully orchestrated counterattack. The ANBU teams that had been shadowing them for weeks emerged from concealment, while Konoha's barrier team began activating their own seal network, one that had been quietly layered into the enemy's array.
Impossible.
Kazan's eyes widened as his containment field began collapsing. These barriers should have blocked all external interference. They did, Sasuke smirked. But you forgot something important about Konoha's security systems. They're not just about keeping enemies out, Naruto continued, wind chakra visibly swirling around him. They're about protecting everything within. The battle that followed was brief but intense. The researchers had indeed developed dangerous techniques, but they'd fallen into a classic tactical error, assuming their intelligence gathering had given them the upper hand, never realizing they were being fed carefully selected information. Naruto's wind techniques proved particularly effective against their barrier seals, literally tearing apart the carefully constructed arrays. Sasuke's Sharingan let him predict and counter their experimental jutsu, while A and BU teams systematically neutralized each threat. This is impossible, Rakurai snarled as she found herself surrounded. Our intelligence was perfect. We had every variable calculated. Except one, Kakashi appeared behind her, Raikiri crackling. You assumed you were the only ones gathering information. Within minutes, the entire research team was captured. More importantly, their barrier network was completely dismantled, preventing whatever larger plan they'd been preparing for. Well done, both of you. The third congratulated them later as Hunter Neen secured the prisoners. Thanks to your patience and skill, we've not only captured a dangerous group, but gained valuable intelligence about remaining threats from Orochimaru's research. Indeed, Tsunade added, studying some of the seized materials. These records will help us identify and secure any other hidden facilities or experiments. The village owes you a debt of gratitude. As promised, both Naruto and Sasuke received field promotions to Chunin rank. But more importantly, they'd gained valuable experience in the complexities of high-level ninja operations. You know what this means, right? Naruto grinned at Sasuke as they left the tower that evening. We're officially ready for bigger missions. Sasuke nodded, a rare smile tugging at his lips. Just try to keep up, dead last. Their friendly bickering carried them through the village streets, past the Hyuga compound where Hinata was finishing her evening training, and toward the promise of new challenges ahead. The wind whispered of change, but this time it was change they were ready for. The next day, life in Konoha began returning to normal, or as normal as things ever got in a hidden village. Team training resumed, missions were assigned, and the daily rhythm of ninja life continued. But subtle differences marked the passage of time and growth. Chapter 18, Paths Forward. With their recent field promotion to Chunin, Naruto and Sasuke found themselves adjusting to new responsibilities. The mission desk began assigning them more complex tasks, often separating them into different teams to maximize their growing skills. Your wind sensing abilities would be perfect for this border patrol mission, Irika explained one morning, sorting through mission scrolls. We've had reports of increased activity near the Land of Rivers. Meanwhile, Sasuke, Team Guy requested you specifically for their reconnaissance operation. Naruto accepted his mission scroll, noting the 2-week duration. These longer assignments were becoming more common as tensions between nations slowly rose following the failed invasion. Though Suna had reaffirmed its alliance with Konoha, other villages watched the situation with careful interest. Before you head out, Irika added, his expression softening slightly, Tsunade-sama wanted to see you both. Something about additional training opportunities. They found not only Tsunade waiting in her office, but also Jiraiya and Kakashi. The presence of both Sannin and their former sensei immediately caught their attention. Good timing. Tsunade looked up from a stack of papers. We need to discuss your continued development. Recent events have made it clear that both of you need to advance beyond standard Chunin training. The ninja world is changing, Jiraiya added, unusually serious. Our intelligence suggests several organizations have begun moving more openly, including some that might have connections to Itachi. Sasuke's posture stiffened at the mention of his brother, but he remained silent, waiting for more information. We're proposing specialized training tracks for both of you, Tsunade continued. Sasuke, you'll work with Kakashi to further develop your Sharingan abilities and lightning techniques. And Naruto. Kid, how'd you like to learn some of your father's legacy? Jiraiya grinned. Naruto's eyes widened. My father. The adults exchanged glances before Tsunade nodded. We believe you're ready to know. Your father was Minato Namikaze, the 4th Hokage. The revelation hit Naruto like a physical blow. The wind in the room stirred unconsciously with his emotions as pieces began falling into place. The similar appearance, his natural affinity for wind chakra, even some of the strange comments people had made over the years. Why? He started, then took a breath to steady himself. Why wasn't I told before? Protection. Jiraiya's voice held old pain. Minato had powerful enemies, both outside and inside the village, combined with the burden you already carried. He gestured vaguely at Naruto's seal. It was decided to wait until you could defend yourself. And now, Naruto's voice was unusually quiet. Now you're ready to learn his techniques, Kakashi spoke up. The Rasengan was just the beginning. There's much more he left behind, especially regarding wind chakra manipulation. The discussion continued for over an hour as they outlined training plans. Jiraiya would take Naruto on extended missions, combining practical experience with advanced technique training. Kakashi would work with Sasuke between his own ANBU duties, focusing on specialized Sharingan applications. This won't be easy, Tsunade warned. We're compressing years of training into months, but recent intelligence suggests we may not have the luxury of time. As they left the tower, Naruto's mind raced with implications. He barely noticed their path taking them past the Hyuga compound until a familiar voice called out.
Naruto-kun.
Sasuke-san. Hinata approached with Niji, both apparently returning from training. She immediately noticed Naruto's distracted expression. Is everything all right? Just got some big news. Naruto managed a small smile. Turns out I know who my father was now. Turns out it was the fourth Hokage. Haha. He laughed out without any hint of humor. That is significant news, Niji said carefully. How are you processing it?